I don't know.
Okay.
Dude, go live.
We're live.
I did want to say really quickly, a little off topic, but I found from November of 2020 a mini review. Do you guys mind if I just read you the abstract, because I think it's actually pretty interesting. The title of the, I'm not going to really call it a paper. I mean, it kind of is, but it's more of a mini review, is Prebiotic Nucleoside Synthesis, the Selectivity of Simplicity. And the abstract states, ever since the discovery of nucleic acids 150 years ago, major achievements have been made in understanding and decrypting the fascinating scientific questions of the genetic code. However, the most fundamental question about the origin and evolution of the genetic code remains a mystery. How did nature manage to build up such intriguingly complex molecules able to encode structure and function from simple building blocks? What conditions were required? How could the precursors survive the unhostile environment of the early Earth? Do these questions sound like somebody familiar? Over the past decades, promising synthetic concepts were proposed, providing clarity in the field of prebiotic nucleic acid research. In this mini review, we show the current status and various approaches to answer these fascinating questions. I just wanted to know if any of you might be interested in this.
What is okay? Would you want to post that paper or the name of that paper, please?
So, was Atangelo like one of the reviewers for this article? Because part of that initial skepticism kind of sounds like reminiscent of like nightmares I've been having for like several having the same thing over and over, and it feels like it doesn't get any response. Like, God, Jesus, am I going fucking insane or what?
I posted it in both the private chat and the live chat.
Okay, thank you.
And I think that paper cites the other one that I talked about, the atmospheric prebiotic chemistry and organic hazes.
It's always funny to see what papers cite as their kind of supporting body, but God, Jesus, it's trying to like some of those papers because they cite like 150 like papers at a time usually because it's a review, so it has to be really expansive and exhaustive sources it's listing.
Wait, what?
I think I have a cruise printed out somewhere.
This isn't full text. What the fuck are you talking about?
Cruise.
I'm finding a lot of different entries. There's this one from March 2019, The Origin of Prebiotic Information System in the Peptide/RNA World, a simulation model of the evolution of translation in the genetic code.
Nice.
That's a big word.
What did you search for, Leo?
For the one I just cited?
Yeah.
I didn't. I was just looking at other, because you know when you're on some websites, it'll give you links on the side to other papers that are relevant. That's what I was going off of.
Yeah, there's a few journals that'll do that, like Elsevier and like Nature, for instance. I believe they will actually
NCBI does it.
Yep, that's what I was on. Yeah,
they have like a related article section in regards to articles that are related to and kind of have a similar kind of message, I guess, in terms of what's trying to be communicated with it. Doesn't always work, but sometimes does.
Oh, mean top hyena should be on top, don't you think?
The article you were reading from earlier, because you said earlier it was 2020. Oh, there it is.
Yeah, that's that NCBI one, and then the PubMed one is the one. But I can only get the abstract. Abstract's pretty long though. It's a few paragraphs.
It's weird actually, because some of the papers I've read, they take a while like to actually get into the content. Like the abstract will be like, oh, in this review, we will cover how pyrimidines and purines on the early Earth.
Yeah, I couldn't read either before. Trust me, you can't read. Neither can I. But go ahead.
And then the fucking introduction will say the exact same shit, and it's like, okay, thank you, I appreciate that. Can we get on the content?
I'm finding a lot of stuff that like is really good information relevant to a lot of the arguments like Otangelo and LPP give. This one on origin of genetic code and tRNA before translation. This is from 2011 though.
The thing is, right? In
2011, that's like, oh my God, that is like so 300 years ago.
It is. It really is. But I can give you the full paper if you guys want it.
Oh no, it actually lets you do the full paper. I think the NCBI one does at least.
Oh, awesome.
lets you get the PDF for it.
If you link it.
What's curious about review articles, though, too, is it's almost like in the abstract and introduction of the article, they actually outline the problem that's trying to be solved, and the topic itself, and what the current issues are, and what the proposed solutions and methodologies are.
Shit, this one is the second one you linked is a simulation model, which is kind of what I've been working.
The one that I'm looking at now, I'm going to link because I've been reading just into it. It's actually pretty interesting. It's from Biology Direct.
Here's a question I have for programmers, and this is probably a more complicated question than it needs to be. How many variables would you need to simulate the universe accurately?
Fuck.
Well, that'd be hard to answer, I would think, because we don't even understand how the universe works at its most fundamental levels yet fully.
Yeah. Well, there's a rule about simulation and there's no quantitative rule, but you can imagine it would take maybe 100 or 1,000 times the size of the universe to simulate the universe. So basically, simulation, the very best way to simulate a system, they found, is to actually have the system and just record information from it, rather than trying to simulate it. Because
but if I'm going
to go ahead.
Okay, if I'm going to be up my own ass about this, right? The argument I would make is that it's not simulating anything. Like it's recording information, but it's not predictive in the sense that you can tell me about the current state of a system, and that's nice. But what if I want to predict the future state of that system, say, a minute from now or 20 minutes from now, right? I would be able to use what I know about the present to make generative models about the future.
Yeah,
that are some level accurate.
And there are different ways you can do that by. You can do that by sampling, and you can do that by basically state. There's some mathematics for states, I think, systems and states, dynamical systems, where you can make some predictions about where it might go next, that sort of thing. But we quickly run into calculus that we can't solve.
I was about to say, I'm pretty sure those are called differential equations.
Right, and we can't solve them. Yeah.
And the thing is, it's curious because when you study dynamical systems, which also goes by the name of chaos theory, there's interesting classes of them which are called infinite dimensional dynamical systems, which essentially is what life is.
Yeah.
Because even though it's not an infinite number of particles interacting, it might as fucking well be. Because like in a liter of air, for instance, you have like 10 to the 30 something particles. That is a fuck ass. That is a fuck ton of particles to try and describe relationships with and figure out what something's going to do, especially because it's not just the position of the particles you're concerned with. It's the fact that the particles have an electric field, and
there's a reason why the ideal gases exist. Versus actual gases.
Well, even ideal gases, though, are horrible because ideal gases depend on temperature to model them, and it also depends on the fact that that they have elastic collisions, so to speak, and that is the fact that every time, if you imagine a particle gas to be like a ball that's impermeable, every time there's a collision, the energy that's maintained is the same between particles.
I believe elastic collision, I think is the word. Elastic, I think, is the word that's there that would be used there.
But if you think about it, that's not actually true to life, because most times if you have two particles that are smashing into each other, it's very likely that if one's moving ever so slightly faster, that when they collide, one of the particles releases a photon of light, because it could be that during that collision, one of the particles has enough energy for its electron to get excited, to move into an excited state temporarily, and there is energy lost to the system. And the second law actually states that should happen, because the energy, the usable energy of a system over time should decay. It should eventually settle to zero. And yeah, that's God, even simple systems like measuring the motion of a gas into a box is, even for ideal particles, is kind of messy.
Mm-hmm.
So, okay, Andrew, the reason that we invited you here tonight is because we're going to do an intervention on you going to Neff's channel. Particularly because you have said several times how bad it was and how uncomfortable, and you keep going. So we understand that you are an addict, and the very first step is admitting that you're powerless over Neff. And those guys. Okay. And that's the first step, and it's kind of tough, but we're all gonna read statements about how you've impacted us.
Okay, I have a quick question. Do you guys ever wonder what Neffy does all day?
Make himself into a stupor.
Yeah, he's got some kind of job. He's got a job. He said he has a job. I'll take him at his word.
Yeah, he works part time, I think, somewhere doing.
He's
something.
like a photographer or something, or he does.
Yeah, well, originally, yeah. He's got. I don't know if he's got like a degree, but I know he has formal education and training as a photographer. Yes.
So how was it, Andrew? Jorge's here. Jorge was there too, I think.
Oh, just the person I wanted to see.
Hello. Yeah, you're enabling Andrew. You're an enabler.
You're also going to enable. You're sorry.
For the record, Andrew was there before me, so I didn't enable him. He enabled me.
Oh, you went there to rescue him.
Yeah.
Or tried to rescue me.
Well, how was it, boys and girls?
You were his rescue device.
Something like that.
Did you convert Neffy? Did you teach him some science?
Oh, I rage quit. I can't. I unsubbed him for a bit. I'm taking like a 2-month break from that douche.
Oh, no shit. Oh, I got to listen to that.
Yeah, I posted.
You do what's healthy for you, Jorge.
Yeah, it's healthy. I know. I posted the clip of me getting pissed at him on my channel. It was classic Neff stuff. I should have known, but
the stream that's going on right now.
No, this was yesterday's stream.
Yesterday.
Dude, why does it not let me look at?
Oh, I'll have to check that out.
Oh, by the way, let me also extend the same offer I extended to Leo. Jorge, I'm not sure your availability, but at some point, these Origin of Life paper trail things we're doing, eventually we're going to get into geology, and that's a subject I am not good at.
Well, the next paper that we're doing gets right into geology and things about prebiotic Earth that we really, really could use your help on, I think. So
do what I can, I guess. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Neff was and me were trying to talk about the carbon 14 in diamonds bullcrap.
Oh no.
And I like an idiot decided to try to organize the conversation where he just wanted that silver bullet. You tell me exactly the answer to my exact phrasing of my exact question. And usual bullshit.
Yeah.
Yeah, I disagree with the saying of if you can't explain it to somebody simply, you don't know the topic. That's inherently false.
Oh, it's 100%. People tell me that all the time. People tell me that all the time. I'm like, or they'll say, well, if you can't explain it to like a fifth grader can understand it, you don't know it well enough. And I'm just like, I would bet that there are maybe a total of 5 fifth graders on the planet that you could find that I could explain gauge theory to and they would understand it, because there are things that are advanced enough, so advanced and so technical that there's so much background, there's so much requisite knowledge you need to have before you can understand that you would have to sit there and literally lecture them for months on end before you even got to the basics of the topic you're trying to initially explain. That statement is just false.
Exactly. That's the reason why there's graduate classes and there's undergraduate classes and there's high school classes. There's a point for that.
Yep.
Thank you for allowing me to go onto the tangent of why I hate speed. He gave me a very mathematically inclined, like by Sir Roger Penrose, which I respect the fuck out of, because he has a book kind of like explaining the mathematics going into like some of the math involved in cosmology. Almost immediately, we hit like analytic continuation, some shit in complex algebra or complex analysis. And it's like, okay, you know what? I'm going to stop this right now. I'm going to teach myself how to write proofs in mathematics and also study a little bit of a little bit more of like the actual like hard math before I get into this.
The hard math, yes.
Because, oh Jesus, I am not a mathematician. I don't want to be a mathematician. But if I want to understand this at its most fundamental level, I really need to teach myself at least proof writing.
I am never going to learn how to write proofs because I don't fucking wanna.
Okay, here's the thing, and I
don't
agree
fucking wanna.
with questions because they can be logical. The only reason I'm trying to learn proofs is that once you have a proof for one thing, you don't have to worry about special scenarios.
Yeah, but proofs, a lot of proofs strike me as like bullshit. Like they make stretches and they leave things out. Like in logic, we did proofs, and I just had a really bad intuitive feeling that we were making shit up.
Well, did you ever challenge your logic professor on the?
I did.
And stuff.
I did, and I don't know. I don't know if he answered me sufficiently on any of the problems I was having. I think he kind of said, I don't know how he put it, but I can't remember. But
was the answer "go fuck yourself"?
It was kind of like "go fuck yourself." I think sort of. I heard that in the subtext. But we were doing what was it, Gödel's theorem and some other weird fucking things we were doing, and it was like, okay, wait a minute, I see holes in this. All this shit. I don't know. I just never been all that fond of proofs. I just like to learn the shit.
Trust me. Shit. One of the proofs I had trouble understanding. Well, not understanding as much as it was accepting. Was was two proofs. One was that
what proof?
Two proofs.
So the first proof was about
the number one.
Is about how we know that there are an infinite number of natural numbers. And the second one being Cantor's argument for the cardinality of the...
yes, that is a nice one. That is a nice proof.
Yeah, for the cardinality of rational numbers larger than the cardinality of the natural numbers.
Yeah, that there are different kinds of infinity. And that is actually a really pretty proof. I mean, that one's interesting. But
it is, but it's a mindfuck.
But it's a lot of work to do proofs. I like to let somebody else do them. I don't know.
Well, it seems almost like analytical proofs, like proofs about numbers and their density, are simpler than proofs regarding geometry and like topology, for instance. Because with that kind of thing, it kind of is like, okay, I can kind of mathematically describe it, but the rules of topology and stuff like that are so abstract that it seems hard to really pin anything down.
Rational numbers are a mindfuck. What the hell is that algebra? Sigma algebra, where basically it's like the space between 0 and 1, and it has to do with probabilities. That's just some really interesting shit to get into.
Here's another interesting fun fact, and I think this one was recently discovered, was that an irrational number raised to another irrational number can in fact be transcendental. And the famous example for that is the square root of 2 raised to the square root of 2. That number is transcendental.
Wow.
I remember I find the concept of transcendental numbers to be interesting. Like immensely interesting.
Crickets bring up transcendental anything.
Yeah, I looked that up. I haven't.
I'm surprised Danny hasn't popped in when you said transcendental.
Yeah, I had to look it up too, and I couldn't remember. But then I saw examples are pi and an Euler's number, and I was like, okay,
Transcendental numbers, particularly, are they're numbers that don't satisfy. They're not proper roots of polynomials with integer coefficients.
Yep, they are non-algebraic, I believe, is a good way to put it.
They can't be expressed. Well,
go ahead.
There's a caveat on that. You can't express them algebraically with finitely many terms.
Mm-hmm.
Infinitely many terms you can.
I did want to answer because I like just saw your question 2 minutes ago in the private chat. Do you think the Poincare recurrence time conflicts with the second law of thermodynamics? That depends, because there's two assumptions that have to be true for the Poincare recurrence time or the Poincare recurrence theorem to hold, and that is that all the particles in the universe have like a finite volume or something like that, and that all the degrees of the number of degrees of freedom in the universe is finite. If either one of those is false, then the Poincare recurrence theorem would be, which for those that don't know states that given a long enough time, a system will revert back into its initial state, essentially.
Yeah.
Its initial state will recur. So if the theorem holds, I would say yes, it would probably pose issues for thermodynamics unless there are any potential caveats to it that I don't know about. Because I've only heard about it a little bit.
Because when we were thinking about the like the case of like molecules of gas bouncing around in a box randomly or seemingly randomly, one thing I thought of was about the Poincare recurrence conjecture in time, is because if you leave it alone for long enough, it's actually ensured that confirmation that the particles started in will eventually recur.
Mm-hmm.
And that seems like it would eventually conflict with the second law, since the second law states that everything tends towards a state of energy where that energy is non-usable.
Yep.
But it's an interesting thought experiment.
It really is.
So was the idea of the idea in history of what's called Laplace's demon, actually trying to prove that that kind of system actually does lose energy over the process that it described.
Hey, I wanted to ask Dessel a question. Dessel or Drace, however he goes by.
Howdy.
There, Drace.
Yep.
Did you watch all of our all the parts of our reading the paper about the cell?
I didn't watch it all. I caught bits and pieces. I kept going back to your stream and then doing like email and all sorts of other stuff. I caught some of it. I
just wondered what you thought of the paper itself, or if you think the format is too boring or something like that.
I don't think the format is too boring. I think it's good to actually sit down and read the actual papers, and the fact that you guys did that, I think, is a good thing. There might be people who aren't interested in actually diving deep into what the papers say, but I mean, I am. So what I thought of the paper overall, I thought it was interesting. I think it brings up like a bunch of different points that are worth looking into in terms of like comparing and contrasting their, what they're calling pleomorphic ensembles as a way of understanding the cell versus the mechanistic approach. But of course, I would have to look more into it to see just like, whether or not some of the things that they talk about are peripheral, because that would be like my concern, because it really like there was a point of you guys reading through the paper where I was thinking to myself, like, this guy really has like this kind of Kuhnian revolution thing that he's trying to bring forward in terms of our reconception of the cell. And so if you want to make that big of a jump, I just want to make sure that the things that all the things that he talks about in the paper are things that are both widespread and do like significantly matter in terms of our understanding everything. So that way it would be appropriate to shift from one frame of reference to the other. You know what I mean? Yeah.
Yeah. But overall, you do wonder when they're making a case like that, because it was definitely like one of those argumentative essays that they taught you about in English class, and he did a great job of it. But you just wonder, how heavy-handed he's being in trying to prove his case.
We got a message from the author, basically complimenting us for actually reading the paper and getting into it instead of just talking about it at 10,000 feet. So
yeah,
Nice.
Didn't he also say that he wasn't going to come on the channel to talk about it? You should ask him to reconsider.
No, I asked him to come on the channel, and he didn't respond to my request.
Oh.
He just said he watched a bit of our review, and he was happy that we actually read the paper. Quick
question: what is he, like, a biologist, a biochemist, a geneticist, a molecular biologist?
I think he's got a degree in molecular biology, but he considers himself a philosopher of biology.
Okay. Honestly, you should say that, you should mention people like Molecular Alchemy and then Dr. Dan and say, we've got a couple other people. They'd really like to talk with you on YouTube on just a live discussion. We're a very much a science-friendly, anti-creationist channel. That's kind of why we would want you to come on and just mention, like, you don't have to mention anything about specifically creationism, but we think that your paper is a huge slap in the face to many arguments of the cell being a machine or being like a factory, and just having you come on and talking with some other PhDs in the subject, we think would be really, really conducive to
counteracting anti-science.
Yeah, really, really conducive to rebutting a lot of the arguments that these creationist intelligent design proponents give based on the complexity of the cell and how that's just it's irreducible.
He also wrote a book, by the way. Everything flows toward a processual. What is it? Toward a processual something. Everything flows. Okay, I can throw it up here. I do want to. I think we should take a look at this book because this is pretty cool. And the PDF is apparently free on his site. The site that links them. So
the PDF version of the book
to the processual philosophy of biology.
Yeah.
If we're trying to get this guy on our channel, I don't think we want to show that we're pirating me.
Well, no, it's not pirated. The PDF is there's a site with all of his papers, and everything is freely available.
Oh,
so
okay.
Selling this thing, but
wanted to be careful with that one.
Well, I might want to ask him. I'm not sure how big the book is. Let's take a look here. It's pretty big.
I did want to play off of what Drace was offering. Commendation on what you guys are doing. I think it's really good. I think the reason that you might not get a lot of viewers isn't really because it's boring, but because, let's be honest, I honestly think that there are probably more creationists that lurk on this channel than probably let us know or that we know about. And I think that a lot of them are bored by it because it's directly refuting one of their largest talking points, that the cell really is a factory, it's a machine, it's all these dumb things that it's not. But another thing that he talks about in his paper, or cells really machines, is the fact that all these aspects of the cell have functional promiscuity, that their function is not as specified as we once thought, and that's why I think he was talking about sort of, I want to say, like that wiring diagram or something like that some people give for the cell just doesn't really work because that requires way more specificity than what you actually find in the cell. And I thought that was just beautiful.
Yeah, and the other thing that I pointed out in the last session was that this is really the key to an understanding of evolution by neutral theory and mutations, and how life finds all these tiny little steps to go from one kind of an organism to another. This is really important, the fact that there's so much stochasticity, that there are so many small experiments going on.
And this is why go ahead, Immutable.
I'm gonna buy his book just to.
I think my major complaint with the paper, it's not really a complaint, but it's more of a critique, right? It's the fact that, like, okay, yes, we should kind of reconsider this mechanistic approach, but in terms of like the educational aspect, right? How is it that you intend to transform our perception of the cell in a way that's easy for people who are like in undergraduate programs to understand it, right? I don't know. I mean, I think it's unreasonable to have undergraduates take chaos theory to try and understand what's happening in a cell. Which, if you're trying to abandon like mechanistic models, that's kind of what you're having to do, right?
Well, are they still teaching like Bohr's model of the atom in like middle school or high school?
It still works all the way up to high school, but the thing is that if you're going to get into like what the actual structure of orbitals is, you have to go into quantum mechanics. And at the high school level, at least currently, I think maybe, 10 or 15 years, when humans decide to actually get fucking smarter, we might be able to introduce like really, really elementary quantum mechanics and teach people that. But right now, at the level that the Bohr model is used, it's what I would call a useful fiction. That's not really
so
it does give an idea of how electrons behave more simplistically, but I would still argue there's a level of accuracy that's still retained.
So
I guess you would do the same with teaching about cell biology.
How I used it.
What's that, Orga?
I've taught high school chemistry. I've taught Bohr's model and quantum to high school students.
Yeah, it's useful.
It's useful for what needs to be accomplished, right? The point of a American high school is basically get a good grade on your SAT or your ACT, and the idea of quantum is not useful to 98% of students that are in high school. So yeah, we use Bohr's model because that's kind of what you see on T-shirts. It does the job it needs to do.
Here's a different thing, but it's similar. The what's called the harmonic oscillator. So the harmonic oscillator, you can make it simplified by assuming that the sine term is small, and you generate a very simple differential equation.
Yep.
And you get a very very nice solution that's easy to model for small angles of theta. But it turns out you can actually solve the equation itself directly. It gets a little hardcore, but you need very high level math to do it. You involve functions that are called elliptic integrals of the first kind, in fact, to solve that problem.
Was that the sequel to Close Encounters of the First Kind? Never. Sorry.
It could be. Might well be. But yeah,
I'm going to hit mute now so that I don't say the first thing that comes to my mind.
Leo, you asked Andrew a question and he didn't get a chance to answer. Was that because
that says Midnight's question
or midnight? Midnight's question. Okay, midnight.
Yeah, my point is that
midnight's gone.
Yeah. Anyway, continue.
Yeah. My point is that you could solve the harmonic oscillator in its full detail. It's just the fact that that type of function is not easy to work with. It's non-elementary. You need very large number of terms to get it to actually start things. And it's a question of if we could have the precise a precise solution for, say, in a 1,000 atom system or something like that. Would we even want to replace it to begin with, right? Would we want to replace the exact solution for the one that's approximate? If anything, because it might take hundreds of thousands of times longer for the exact solution to give us the precise result, whereas, the model that makes approximations takes 1,000 times, it's 1,000 times less, as quick, right? So it's a matter of, I think as much of it is due to precision, it's also a matter of practicality in terms of how do we choose what model to use, especially given that we live in a finite universe, we don't have infinite computing power, and where do we want to draw the line in terms of how much computing time is enough for a specific problem to be solved?
Yeah.
I would also think that a problem, and I guess this in some sense depends on how deep you would go into electron orbitals, but if you're going down the route where you are involving at least some quantum mechanics, the people that are taking the class are going to have a fairly solid understanding of calculus, because I would imagine, and Immutable could correct me if I'm wrong here because he actually took chemistry, but I would imagine that Schrodinger's equation is going to appear, and then you're going to need to know partial derivatives, which is multivariate calculus, which is not necessarily difficult, but it can be, but it is more difficult than single variable calculus. And I feel like for high school,
solving the problems is difficult, but understanding what it's about, if calculus is explained properly, just doesn't seem to be all that hard.
Well, no, but partial derivatives, I don't know many high school classes that aren't AP where you even really dive into partial derivatives.
Correct.
Yeah, because solving the problems is really a bitch.
Well, but also the concepts and the rules that you have, they can change slightly, and it's just more advanced than single variable calculus, to the point that it's like it's superfluous to teach this at the high school level. If somebody wants to learn that, then they can go to college and learn it in an environment where they're going to get all the technicalities and the nuances that are relevant to the subject, that if it was taught at a secondary level would probably have to be glossed over. So to me, it's just superfluous to teach it.
Partial derivative is just cutting a curve or taking a slice, and then you got a derivative, right? I mean,
that's true for one dimensions. That's true.
I'm of the opinion that if you can't fucking explain it to anybody, then you don't quite understand it.
Well, it depends on how you're explaining it too.
Speed. What was your definition you just gave? Cutting a curve and taking a slice, you said?
Yeah, you take a complex curve in a multi-dimensional space and you take a slice.
Okay, so
is that right?
Can you write me 10 questions on that to ask a student?
Oh my.
Right? It is difficult because you need to be able to test the student on these things, and if you say cut the curve and take the slice to the student, that's not an explanation.
But you could intuitively prepare them for the field, right? So they know what the hell
high school doesn't prepare you for fields.
Trying to figure out.
So there's two things that kind of fall into place here, and one is regarding when you say slice a curve, right? The question you'll encounter with mathematicians, and this is a valid question, is how should we slice the curve, right? In what way should we partition, if you will,
but what the fuck do you need to know any of that to intuitively understand?
Because here's the thing, right? If you want to slice the curve, right, especially along some interval, you want to make sure that your partitions are uniform. That meaning they have some consistent property, that they don't depend on some weird property involving the function itself. And there's special ways to choose the kind of partition to apply for breaking apart a function and measuring it on a specific interval. But the other problem.
Jorge, do you teach calculus too?
I taught pre-calculus.
Okay,
I ended by teaching some calculus the last month or two.
Have you ever heard of this book that was written in 1907 by this guy? His name's Thomas or something like that, and it's called Calculus Made Simple, and it was 1903 or 1907.
Lucky for me, the school I taught at didn't use textbooks in 1903, so no, I'm not.
No, this one. But I mean, okay, this is a classic, and I managed to get a copy of it because I think it. Well, I think they've reprinted it because it's such a fascinating book. But within pages, he teaches you integral and differential calculus intuitively, and then he goes ahead and he fills it in with the facts, with how to do it, and he does it so quickly and so easily and so. It just gives you a grasp of it.
I 100% believe you. I 100% believe you. But that being said, just because a book worked for you does not mean it's a book that can be used to teach at a school.
Well, this book is famous for working for a lot of people.
I believe it. Lots of books are famous.
Here's the thing as well, is that some books that are what I'll call dirty in a way. And I call it dirty because most university level courses won't touch this until you hit real analysis, and that is when you touch on the notion of a limit in calculus, it's led to believe that you're just getting closer and closer and closer and closer and closer to some prefix value, which is what's happening, sort of. But then you have to ask the question, how do you know that your function is in fact uniformly approaching that value and that, whatever outputs are not varying wildly, right? How do you know that the values your function is approaching on the x and y axis do not, vary wildly as you get closer and closer and closer, so to speak? And that problem is solved by what's called the Epsilon Delta definition of the limit. And that is something which I'm not prepared to discuss further, but needless to say, it is a very technical and very precise definition
Can you see that? Thompson. It's an amazing. I mean, I've got a copy that was printed in like 1950 or something like that, but It's just wonderful. And it was.
Show it again.
It was reprinted in 1960, and I think its copyright is like 1903. Well, it doesn't even have a copyright because they didn't do that back then.
Yeah.
So. I like my textbooks to be not too easy because I prefer them to be rigorous to some extent when they're going through a result and showing like some major feature of a chapter. Because
again, coming from my perspective, I Immutable and Speed are describing two preferred textbooks, and that's the problem with education is everyone has a different way they learn. So teaching calculus to people, you need to be very varied, and usually the textbook that you get is chosen by people who've never taught math before. So
yeah.
And high school students don't want to be given two textbooks. And
another problem that I find, especially with calculus in schools, is that they don't really teach you a lot of the intuitive concepts of it. They teach you the old wonky donkey stuff that everybody's been learning practically since it was fucking invented, but you're not learning it intuitively. And I find that like when I ask people what a derivative is and they give me the same answer, that I think it's just the dumbest response that you could give to answer that question. It's always instantaneous rate of change. I hate that definition. I fucking hate that definition.
That's what it is, though.
Well, I mean, yes, but instantaneous means like at some point, and then rate of change.
Holy shit!
It's like saying you're measuring fixed change. It makes no sense. I would argue a better definition for a derivative is the thing that measures how sensitive the output value is to changes in the input value.
Okay, now the thing is, though, is that you're being a philosopher. Because
philosophy of math is one of the philosophies that I think is really important to the actual subject.
I mean, philosophy of philosophy is important also, but go ahead.
Okay, but if you ask a philosopher to, what's the instantaneous rate of change of a function at some point, that question doesn't make sense. Because even though it's mathematically well defined, that's not what derivatives do. Derivatives depend on a limit, right? So
limit sequence line.
Well, the thing is, like, the important aspect is the limit doesn't tell you what happens at the value you're approaching, but it tells you what happens as you get closer and closer and closer to the value you're approaching. So, in a way, taking a derivative and evaluating it at an instantaneous point of time is somewhat awkward in terms of.
So I found the 2020 new edition of Calculus Made Easy by Tim Editor.
Calculus Made Simple by Thompson was the book I was talking about.
Yeah, I know. Calculus Made Easy, Made Simple. It's the same.
Made Easy by Thompson. I'm sorry.
Yeah, that's what I found. There's also a 2020 edition. I'm trying to find the 1910 edition, which I'm guessing they're basically the same book, just updated.
Yeah, they're still printing it apparently. It's cool.
And here's the thing too, and I agree with Leo for the following reason.
I fucking love math. Go ahead.
So Leo, you've done some Calc 3, right?
Very little, but yes, some.
You also know what a limit is?
A what?
A limit.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, the thing is if you're careful enough with Calc 3, the notion of a limit that's established, at least the way it's taught in university, is shattered. Why?
Yeah, that is true.
Because the limit in one dimension is very simple to consider. You have two directions you can approach it from. Once you increase the number of dimensions by 1, the number of directions you can approach a point is infinite. And that is because the argument you run into is now, it doesn't matter necessarily if you can show that the limit from some particular combination of angles converges to some value. Because what you needed to do is you need to show that the limit of the function at some value is independent of the route that you take.
Yeah.
That it exists despite what direction you're approaching it from. And that can be a bit.
Yeah, definitely. That's a very good point, actually. It's a very good point.
And it's infeasible if you're dealing with higher dimensional spaces.
Yeah.
So I have a quick question for Immutable that's probably going to trigger him. Do you remember? Do you remember a certain Edgar?
Oh, Jesus fuck!
Remember the question everyone always asked him? What is the derivative of x squared?
Oh God! We asked that question to prove empiricism too.
Jesus Christ!
Yeah. Oh man, it's a shame that guy isn't on YouTube anymore. But Jesus hell, he was
Who was that?
Character.
Mr. Intelligent Design, dude. You know, the founder of the new. What was it? The New Evolution or something? No, the new.
The guy from Japan or the Philippines or something.
Yeah, the guy with the experiment with the eggs in the tissue paper. Yeah. Has anybody seen his debate with Aaron where he presented that Aaron's face?
No, wait, hold on. He talked to Kent Hovind, and I swear to Christ, Kent Hovind left after 40 minutes. I'm not even joking. I'm surprised he lasted that long. Even Kent Hovind is like, what the fuck?
He just resurfaced somewhere. He just resurfaced, that guy. He was on somebody's channel. I forget what it was.
Really?
Yeah.
His name is Edgar Pastrano.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Edgar Pastrami? Well, now I'm hungry.
Well, we do not support cannibalism.
Pastrami, whatever. Fuck you.
All right.
Fucking Udemy changed their funny little question. They always, when you sign up for Udemy courses, they always ask you these questions, and they ask you, "What do you intend to do with the knowledge from this course?" And I always tell them, like, achieve world peace, or cure cancer, or some crazy.
What course are you taking?
I don't want to talk about it.
Oh, by the way, since we talked about no-nos, and this is one that Leo will understand. Here's another no-no that you don't do. Never ask somebody that does abstract algebra what a set is.
No.
And why would that be for the audience and for me?
What's non-abstract algebra?
The regular algebra.
Algebra at base 10, essentially.
They don't talk about trains leaving stations at different times and speeds.
So, Midnight, you asked a question, Andrew, by the way, earlier.
Here's a more tongue-in-cheek answer for you, Danny. You will never hear the word modular if you're in regular algebra.
Yeah.
Interesting. I don't recall hearing that word.
Yep. Modules, rings, groups, lattices. These are all things that you deal with in abstract algebra, which is just a lot of fun.
Leo, you're turning me on right now with this math talk. No kidding.
Oh, if this turns you on, the math will turn you off. Because
not really. I mean, math is hard. I'm not gonna lie, but I've never been turned off by math.
Abstract algebra makes Chinese algebra look simple.
I really wish I was super intelligent like Lucy, and I don't mean the Lucy we know. I'm talking about the Lucy from the movie.
Oh yeah. Well, I wish I could do that, and then I would have less issues with competition.
Do the Chinese use Chinese characters for their variable names?
Yes, maybe. I don't know.
So do we, actually. Because we use two variables that are actually, I believe they're Chinese. One's called xi, so xi, and the other one is called
Zygon?
Xi is Greek.
There's two, which is one's called Kasi and the other one's called I.
So you do a lot of Chinese math?
No. Here's the thing with mathematicians. I don't know how it's possible, but we don't have enough variables to account for the types of things we want to describe. So eventually, we just start making shit up.
Literally.
Okay, the answer to your question, Midnight.
Okay, I don't remember what question I asked. Could you remind me?
I don't know what it is either. The amount of H plus in the core of the sun is finite. ... I
don't know, but maybe we should get the standing for truth in here.
I remember Otangelo one time put a quote from Fred Hoyle, and I had to laugh at that because Fred Hoyle is.
Otangelo did?
Yeah.
I just wanted to I think I remember. Yep. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
The thing is, Fred Hoyle was he made one important contribution to science, but Jesus was he delusional.
Yeah, he was one of those where like people respected quite a bit of the work that he did, but his opinions were just trash. Let's be honest, they were trash.
Well, he was unwilling to give up his steady state model of the universe, which would have required hydrogens to just keep popping into existence simultaneously from nothing.
And when your model disagrees with either the first or the second law of thermodynamics, straightforwardly, you just don't have a good model.
I like thermodynamics.
Thermodynamics. It's not a good model. And like that's the one thing I can't remember who I remember hearing it from. It was either Sean Carroll or Leonard Susskind. It might have been Michio Kaku. But one of them said that like if there's one scientific law that's going to survive the next 1,000 years, it's the second law of thermodynamics. And if your model disagrees with the first law or the second law of thermodynamics, it's a really bad model. If it disagrees with both, it's not a fucking model at all. It's just not.
Wasn't Noether's theorem thought to have violated the second law of thermodynamics?
Notors Theorem?
Yeah.
I couldn't imagine why. Because all Notors Theorem states is that for all observed symmetries in nature, there must be a corresponding conserved quantity.
Right, but it describes some symmetries in which energy does not get conserved.
Well, yeah, like in general relativity, but there's some nuances there. It essentially means that if the symmetry doesn't exist, then that conservation doesn't exist either. So in general relativity, time translation symmetry can be violated. So the conservation of energy can essentially be violated, but violated it's about 40, let's just call it in the middle, about 45% tongue-in-cheek. I can't really explain it right off the top of my head, but I can...
It's fine. I'm not about to get into...
Okay, I was just going to say, if you want, I can cite something from Preposterous Universe, Sean Carroll's blog, and he goes over this and says, yeah, kind of tongue-in-cheek, but then again, it's kind of not, but it's not like thermodynamics has fallen apart because of it.
Yeah.
But no, in my opinion, just since you mentioned it, Notors Theorem, I think, is just one of the most beautiful mathematical theorems because it ties symmetries to conservation laws. And it's very, very important in gauge theory.
By the way, I just want to say you're scaring Danny.
Why?
If you know what the closest thing to a philosopher is in the science is, ask a string theory.
Yeah.
What about the string theory?
If you want to ask,
it's not even wrong.
In a science opinion, ask a string theorist.
If you someone spoke over you, Immutable. If someone asks a philosopher about string theory,
no. If you want to get as close to a philosopher as you can with regard to the sciences, ask a string theorist.
Oh, okay. I feel like physics starts to get too close to philosophy sometimes.
How
in
so?
a sense, yeah.
Well, the idea of randomness and such, causation.
The fuck is randomness?
Well, it has several meanings, but sometimes it's linked with indeterminism. So the idea is that the event has no explanation or no cause.
How did you determine that?
Will determine what?
Exactly.
Okay.
I would think you would have a fun time with the mathematicians in that case, because the mathematicians are like the that are providing us with the weaponry to fight against us, to wage this war against philosophy.
That the mathematicians are what? Is his audio kind of? Is it just me?
Well, it has to do with the sensitivity of mics, and some people might move, and then if somebody else is talking when that happens, their voice drops out, and then it comes back in.
My cat is chewing on the microphone.
What I was saying is that you might want to fight with the mathematicians more than the scientists.
Oh, on the random stuff?
Yeah, probably.
Random's a little hard, yeah, and it's kind of a math. Well, you could define a function to be random, I guess.
It turns out you can take the derivative of the random distribution function, or of the factorial function, I should say. It's not a random function. That's kind of weird.
Your mic is screwed up, immutable.
Yeah.
Okay, it wasn't just me.
Yeah, it sounds like you're.
I think we lost him.
No, he said he's going to refresh, so he'll be back in a couple minutes.
So, getting back to these math books and stuff, I noticed there was Martin Gardner did a rewrite or something, or maybe a commentary on that Calculus Made Easy by Thompson.
Yeah.
And of course, he was in a columnist for Scientific American. Everybody just loved him. Anybody? Yeah. So if I read that book, would it make me ready to learn differential equations?
Wait, what book?
Calculus Made Easy.
I think it would be a really good start. It would give you a good idea about differential and integral calculus. It would give you a real good mastery of it, I think.
Yeah, because that's kind of an incompleteness I had in my life. I never took differential equations in college, and I just wanted to try and see if I could handle it.
I suffer from a lack of good intuition on differential equations.
Trust me, you're not alone, and that's because most differential equations can't be solved.
Yes.
Well, not talking about solving. I'm talking about understanding, looking at them and understanding what it's saying about something. Okay, if you have a system that you're modeling and they show you a differential equation, you don't need to solve the damn thing. You just need to understand kind of what's going on, and then you get an intuitive sense of what the system is.
Here's the best way to explain what a differential equation is. If you roll an object down a hill and you know exactly how it changes with respect to time and other things that pertain to that rate of change, what a differential equation asks you is, given that information, so given a function and the sum of
two different rates
and some combination of its derivatives.
Yeah.
What was the thing that you dropped down the hill?
Okay. Yeah, that's a good way to talk. That's a good way to describe it.
Yeah, essentially, it's asking you to trace back the trajectory of the object and to use that information to tell us what the object was, which is not simple.
There's a lot of animosity in the chat, guys.
Well, what do you expect? Standing for Truth was in there.
Well, Standing for Truth is spreading his fake news. He refused to show the email that he's accusing Dan of some fake thing, but he won't really give us the evidence.
Oh,
okay. Why?
Accept it.
What?
What's happening? Where am I right now?
Did something bad, apparently. That's the word I heard.
What did you say?
I had. Go ahead, someone else.
Oh, okay. Well, I was just going to say to Scott that if you just take basic differential calculus, like single variable calculus, you'll be introduced to differential equations, but the class differential equations is generally taking them and putting them on super steroids. I mean, dy over dx equals f of x is some form. That's a differential equation. You'll learn about that in just basic introductory calculus. But when you start getting into big time differential equations, like as applied to the real world. Like a good-ish example would be the Schrodinger's equation, which is I believe a second order partial differential equation. Solving that equation is, an immutable can attest to this, is not easy, and there are many instances where we cannot provide analytic solutions to it.
The term analytical here just means that we can't avoid a solution that doesn't involve infinitely many terms.
Yes.
Basically. I mean, animosity, there's no animosity for you. I don't know, but it's kind of weird to bring up animosity. I mean, if anything, never mind. Never mind. I'm going to stop picking on Danny.
Most different.
No, I'm saying that they weren't getting along. By animosity, I just meant they're not getting along in the chat. That's all I meant.
No, I know. I was making a joke that the only animosity that exists on this channel is between me and you, but I was joking. Go ahead.
Most different.
I don't even hate you or dislike you.
Animosity is a thing in abstract algebra.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
They make everything. Is it like a
no? But it should be. It fucking should be.
It's one of those animosity equations. There's the animosity curve. Yeah. I dreamed about that one night.
I would give anything to have a 12th level intellect like Lex Luthor.
Jesus.
You know, there's certain things in physics where it just fucks with me. Like the idea of a functional, which is basically a function that takes variables and spits out a function as its result.
It's a function of a function. Yeah, quantum field theory.
No, hold on. Think of it this way. It's a 3D printer that prints other 3D printers. There you go.
It's a function of a function. That's a very simplistic definition.
Well, yeah, but the analogy works.
I wouldn't mind a 3D printer that printed other 3D printers. That would be pretty cool.
My 3D printer was printed by 3D printers parts-wise. So, I mean, just saying.
Yeah, there you go.
I thought a 3D printer was for making guns.
Let's save
benefit, yes.
Let's save ourselves some mental capacity here and not ask the question of what exactly that function is doing in terms of linear algebra or other nonlinear algebras.
That's actually interesting in programming wise. Whether a program could, whether you could use a function to return a function, you can use a function to return a variable. But I never run across.
You can use a function to return a function. And in fact, in quantum mechanics, we have things that do that. They're generally called, I believe, linear operators.
Well, no, I'm talking about computer science wise.
Yeah. Don't talk to me. I don't know shit about computer science.
Well, when the fuck are you going to learn, Leo?
Probably never. I don't give a shit about computers.
Bite your tongue, man.
But that's what astronomy is.
Yeah, astronomy. That's why I'm into astrophysics.
Okay, but basically, like, astronomy is like applied computer programming.
I hate being me at times. Then again, never mind. I love being me.
That's the spirit.
Yes.
There you go.
There's only one midnight, and once I die, there will be none. Boy, that got morbid.
Then I will be living after midnight, quite literally.
Rocking to the home.
No, okay. I'm gonna die when I'm 300. You're gonna die when you're 100. I'm gonna outlive you.
I will just be frozen in a cryogenic chamber and then be reawakened at some.
I thought the end thing was to be downloaded onto a computer.
Look, Scott, it's a stepwise process here. I'm not exactly.
Holy shit! What the fuck are we doing?
Computer programming.
No, I know. But...
Yeah, it's pretty simple, actually. It's really simple.
Huh? Frequent matrix, lambda.
I'm working on something.
Oh, Speed, are you doing lambda calculus?
Well, you do. It's a lambda function. It's based on lambda calculus. But yeah, I have done lambda calculus. I do like lambda calculus, but
so you're using a Jupyter journal or whatever.
Putting together. Okay, I might have an error in here now because I started writing something. What the fuck did I do?
Oh wait, aren't you using bioinformatics?
Not for this. It's just it's real simple Python.
But I know. GGC
peptide list. Okay, what the fuck? Where's peptide list? Let's get something else up. Oh, okay. I'm sorry.
What? You're sorry? What did you do?
I'm sorry. I did this. Okay, let me run this again. Every time you run this, it gives you random. It gives you Demeter's random sequences. His basically every time you run it, it gives you a different set of around 845 random nucleotides, small nucleotides, basically. And we got to figure out a whole lot of shit. But it's amazing how many. They don't look random, do they? Like that's the thing about random, Danny. Is that when you actually do a random calculation, like if you try to write something random, you end up with this thing that is nothing like a random sequence.
Are these all the same number of characters?
What's that? Yeah.
Well, I'm seeing, your characters strung together, separated by spaces.
Yeah. Each one is a separate polynucleotide, basically.
So, do they have the same number of characters?
No.
I guess not. Okay.
No, if you're in this matrix here, you can decide how many G, C, T, A's there are. Okay. So this one is only going to have like three nucleotides in it. So it has two and 0. And if I wanted to, I could add another one here. I'm probably boring the fuck out of people, eh?
No, I'm just feeling a little down.
I could add another one here where I could say, okay, there's one, and one, and that will give me 4, and it'll have one of each. So there'll probably be a lot of repeats, but I don't know where it would be. But
I just have one question.
Which one?
When will this program answer the question for me? What is the meaning of life? And the answer to that question better not be 42.
No, it's 850. Okay, it's right here, immutable. It's 856.
Oh, there we go.
Yeah, well, fucking Douglas Adams. He didn't know what the fuck he was talking about.
Too bad. The meaning.
That's fucking wanker.
The meaning of life is death. So 42.
So can I take a second to answer a few questions from Andrew in the chat?
Yes,
he said he wanted to answer some questions to kind of change the topic, and I think he kind of wants me to jab a little bit at standing for truth. He says, "What are your thoughts on the validity of cosmic inflation in its most basic form? It meets every parameter that a theory meets, except for direct observational observational evidence. It explains pretty much all the things that we need to explain with it: the flatness of space-time, the homogeneity and the isotropy of space-time. It explains the magnetic monopole problem. What's the other one that I'm thinking? The horizon problem. The thing is, it fits into the standard model of cosmology without any major modifications to the math. So the fact that it already meshes well with the models that we already have is in and of itself an indication that this is probably something on the right track.
We are.
There's specifically one thing you left out there.
What?
And that, technically speaking, in a functional sense, inflationary cosmology is unfalsifiable.
In what way?
Yeah, so I would like to add something to that because I have a book that I picked up. It's from the 1990s, and it's called Observational Tests of Inflation. And it says directly in the book in multiple articles that inflationary theory makes exact specific predictions on the nature of space, on the nature of the cosmic microwave background. And the whole point of the book is that they're going through it to make sure that none of the specific predictions that inflation would give contradict the available evidence that's given to them. And it turns out that all the predictions that are necessitated by inflationary theory still remain safe by the end of the book. So I don't understand. I mean, like, I can imagine you making a claim like Paul Steinhardt, where if you have a particular kind of inflationary paradigm, it might become unfalsifiable, like, eternal chaotic inflation and his critique with respect to that. But if you actually look at how inflation became part of like a consensus cosmology for today, it didn't do it just because it was like, that it wasn't falsified. It actually went through a stringent time where it had to comport with all the evidence that we had. And this is just one book that demonstrates that.
Yeah, there are numerous predictions that it did make that we were capable of confirming, like you said, and almost every single one of them has been confirmed.
Okay, but if I'm not mistaken, hasn't Alan Guth basically conceded the fact that there is no situation you could posit that could not be accommodated for by an inflationary model in cosmology?
I don't know what that means. Like, he's saying that there's no, like, wait, what? I'm confused.
There is a hypothetical you can propose that could not potentially be solved by inflationary cosmology.
I don't know. I wouldn't say it's unfalsifiable, because the period in which it took place, we will be able to observe once we get a quantum theory of gravity. We don't have one yet. The furthest back we can go observationally before general relativity breaks down is 10 to the negative 13th seconds after t equals 0. Experimentally, with just given by recreating certain environments and particle accelerators, is, I believe, about 10 to the negative 32nd seconds after t equals 0, which would have been the end of the inflationary epoch.
Yeah,
once we have quantum gravity, we should be able to go before that to pretty much the earliest moments of the universe and beyond, if there is a beyond.
I'm not huge into like inflationary cosmology. I understand like some of what it states, but I'm skeptical of it for the reason that it seems that it can't be falsified. But I could be wrong on that one.
Why don't you ask Google?
Yeah, that's a good question for Cora right there. Yeah.
The other question.
Yeah,
never mind. Go ahead. Jump on.
I was just gonna throw out there that if you're interested in the question, try checking out that book that I talked about, because I just picked it up recently myself, and I've been going through it. I haven't studied it in detail. I've just been basically like checking out the abstracts and some of the conclusions and stuff, and seeing where they all kind of wind up. But it's called Observational Tests of Inflation. You should be able to find it, and yeah, it's pretty good. It has like there's a bunch of different authors all collected together, and they all go through testing various aspects of inflationary theory. It was written in the beginning of the 1990s.
Yeah, okay, so there is a model, so there is a paper written in 1997 by John D. Barrow and Andrew R. Little, and it states in the abstract, despite its central role in modern cosmology, doubts are often expressed as to whether cosmological inflation is really a falsifiable theory. The distinguish between two facets of inflation. One is the theory of initial conditions of the hot Big Bang, and another as a model for the origin of the structure in the universe. We argue that the latter can readily be excluded by observations, and that there are also a number of ways in which the former can find itself in conflict with observational data. Both aspects of the theory are indeed falsifiable.
Who wrote the book you're talking about?
That's not a book. That comes from a paper.
No, was it Orge that was talking about? Who was talking about the book?
Drace.
Okay, Drace. Who wrote the book?
1 second, let me pull it up. I'll find out who the authors are. Okay, let's see here.
Involved in it as well. He pretty much pioneered that field.
So, can I just while he's trying to find that, I wanted to share. This is an article from 2019 by PhD theoretical astrophysicist Ethan Siegel. In brief, the 6 most generic predictions were: 1, there should be an upper limit to the maximum temperature the universe achieves post-inflation. It cannot approach the Planck scale of roughly 10 to the 19th GeVs, giga-electron volts. 2, super-horizon fluctuations, or fluctuations on scales larger than light could have traversed since the Big Bang, should exist. 3, the quantum fluctuations during inflation should produce the seeds of density fluctuations, and they should be 100% adiabatic and 0% isocurvature, where adiabatic and isocurvature are the 2 allowed classes. 4, these fluctuations should be almost perfectly scale invariant, but should have slightly greater magnitudes on larger scales than smaller ones. 5, the universe should be nearly, but not quite, perfectly flat, with quantum effects producing curvature only at the 0.01% level or below. 6, and the universe should be filled with primordial gravitational waves, which should imprint on the cosmic microwave background as B modes. It's now 2019, and the first 4 predictions have been observationally confirmed. The 5th has been tested down to the 0.4% level and is consistent with inflation thus far, but we haven't reached a critical level. Only the 6th point has not been tested at all, with the famous false positive detection appearing earlier this decade, owing to the BICEP 2 collaboration.
And let me just throw out there, because I had a laugh when I pulled up the book, because we were wondering what the authors were, and Guth is one of the authors of this book. Besides that, you have Shanks, Banday, Ellis, Frank, and Wolfendale, all authors of this.
Good.
Yeah, okay. That is available for free. Did you know that at NCBI? I'll put a link in public chat.
Cool.
I did want to answer another question that Andrew had. Would you be able to explain the terms scale, invariant, and Gaussian in cosmology? Gaussian, the only thing I know is a Gaussian function, which I believe relates to a bell curve. Honestly, I don't. I know in cosmology that has something to do with fluctuations, I believe, but I don't know enough to be able to say exactly what the connection there is. Scale invariant just means that whatever thing you're looking at or measuring doesn't change as the scale changes. So the say some quantity does not vary as you under transformations of the scale of whatever structure you're examining, i.e., scale invariant.
It's important to note that a lot of theoretical physicists do say that for when we do have a grand unified theory or a theory of everything, so to say, that the scale would be variant to scale, that certain aspects of the theory would at least appear different at macroscopic levels than it would at microscopic levels.
Yeah, I mean, we kind of observe that now.
Yeah.
Especially in particle physics.
What do I want to see?
So now Andrew needs to ask more questions.
It's going to be interesting to see who wins this kind of arms race in terms of...
I have a few.
Oops, sorry.
Go ahead.
Yeah. Did you post the book in the chat, or?
I did, yeah. What? Who, me?
I don't see it. I see the link I posted, but I don't see...
There was a link that said observational something.
Nope, yeah. I'm looking in the private chat and I don't see it.
No, look in the public.
Jesus, well, you guys need to start learning how to use both like I do.
What is private chat?
He does public. He's strictly public.
Yeah, you can't do it for the audience, and they won't.
I post it in both. That way, I don't have to try to fucking look for. Yeah, I can't copy that off the highlighted comment. You can't just stick it in the private chat.
Well, I could.
I got a question for Drace, if I can go ahead and interject it. I'm noticing your avatar there. Is that one of those Andrew Sumar? I think was his name. He did that famous controversial photograph, Piss Christ, where he
Here you go.
Awesome, thank you. Muchos.
This is a screenshot from The Exorcist, the beginning or Dominion or whichever.
Okay.
They made two movies, and they were the exact same movie with just like slightly different details in the plot line. Same actor and everything, but this is from that. It's just it's an upside down inverted cross.
Yeah, the background made me think of that Piss Christ.
They made two versions of The Exorcist?
Yeah, they have. Well, it's not the original Exorcist movie from the 70s, but they made like 2 and 3 and so on.
Oh, okay.
But then
was that the one where Linda Blair was a teenager?
Well, these two movies that I'm referring to, they are when Father Marin is a younger man. He's like in his 30s, and they bring him to this site to excavate this like pyramid.
I saw that,
But the thing is that they have two different movies of exactly that. One's called The Beginning, and the other is called Dominion, and they're both exactly the same fucking movie, but just with slight details changed.
I think they're both really bad too. I don't know.
Yeah, I didn't mind. I think it was. I think I might have saw Dominion first or The Beginning or whatever. But I saw one of the two, and I didn't mind it. I thought it was okay. But then I saw the other one, and since it was the exact same movie with like very few details changed, it just kind of ruined the whole thing for me.
Yeah.
But I still say the original Exorcist was the best one.
Oh yes, that was. I saw that in the theaters back when they had the subliminal flashes on them and stuff. Like I saw it when it came out in theaters to show you how old I am.
Well, so old.
It was a while ago.
Well,
I think I was a teenager when I saw it.
Do you like Christopher Lee?
Christopher Lee.
Everyone likes Christopher Lee. Yes.
I don't know who.
He
Chris.
was Count Dooku, right?
Christopher Lee played Saruman in the Lord of the Rings trilogy. He played Dracula. He was also in the original Wicker Man. So yeah, he's like known. He's known for all of, like the horror movie type stuff. He's been in a bunch of other things as well. But anyway, I bring him up because he has an audiobook reading of The Exorcist, and it's awesome. Like he does such a great job, especially with the demon's voice and everything. And you can find that for free on YouTube.
Yeah, I recognize him. Yeah.
Steve, do you know if there's a free version of that book?
Which one?
The inflation book?
Observational test of cosmological inflation.
I posted a free version.
No, you didn't. It cost $230.
What?
Dude, it's from Springer. I have never seen anything free from Springer.
Wait a minute. What are we talking about? Observational tests by Shanks and Stanley?
I'm looking at it now. It's not free.
NCBI, download the book, and it downloaded the PDF.
I don't see that anywhere.
CBI.
Well, yeah, wait, what? I don't. Hold on. NCBI.
It's the NCBI link I put up. Or
you didn't put up an NCBI link. You put up a Springer link.
Yeah,
and fun with the NCBI. Good night, everyone.
I don't see a link to NCBI anywhere here.
Where are we losing? That was Orgay.
Yeah, I'm not seeing a.
You see that?
No, I don't.
Download book PDF. That's what it says.
Nope, I don't have that.
There's a Springer link right here in private chat. The very last link.
Yeah, I clicked on that. I don't have a download book PDF.
I don't see where it says.
Oh, okay. I think it's just for like. I'm not going to say it.
Hold on. Scroll up. Show us your URL. Do you have the ability to show us your URL?
It's the same URL that's in the fucking private chat.
Well, hold on.
I'm looking at it.
Hold on here. Just give me a second.
Are you like subscribed and logged into this?
Maybe.
That didn't do anything
either. No, I'm not logged in. It says log in.
I don't. I followed your link and I don't have one of those download buttons either. So I figure maybe you're still logged in.
Yeah, I might have paid him
from a cookie.
I might have paid him at some point. I don't know.
Because over to the right is a box that tells me I can buy this for $229.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay, meet me outside MGM Liquors in a half an hour, and wear dark clothes, and I'll bring you a copy.
All right.
Bring cash.
Cash only transaction.
Yeah.
Like all legitimate liquor store meetups.
The reason I say that is because I used to meet somebody outside the MGM liquor store, and she was always late. She was always fucking late.
I'd like to introduce
youngsters how not to get caught.
I'd like to introduce some dumpster fire topics just to get the conversation rolling a little bit.
Sure.
Cool.
Yeah. So basically, there's three issues. The first one is methodological naturalism. The second one is Jesus mythicism, because I know that's controversial. And the third one is whether or not science can prove things. Those are three topics that maybe we can go into, and I'm sure it'll turn into a bit of a dumpster fire because my positions on these issues tend to be in the minority.
That sounds great, but I did want to answer one more question from Andrew, if I may, before we dive into that, just so it's out of the way. I don't want to forget it.
Do it up.
Okay, so he asked, how common are cyclic cosmologies in the literature? Any number on their acceptance in comparison to inflation? If you mean common in the fact that many have proposed cyclic cosmologies, they're out there. I wouldn't say that they're ubiquitous. They're generally not very highly accepted, simply because there's never been a cyclic cosmological model that corresponds well with the observations that we make.
But they're also kind of relatively new to the game, so you got to give them a little bit of a break there.
So on methodological naturalism, it strikes me as extremely simple. If you open your garage door and your car's gone, there are certain things you would do to investigate why it's gone if you think it's not supposed to be gone, and that's methodological naturalism. You would never assume that God took it or that somebody poofed it away in some sort of curse or whatever.
You'd assume it was stolen.
Natural causes.
Yeah, like it was stolen.
No. See. You know, if you found your car missing, you'll be like, God damn it, God. You know, at least bring the car back.
I would pray for it.
No. If the car's gone and there's just a note on the garage door that says, "I told you not to bang that hooker." Yeah. As a concern, what? So somebody said
pull out. You should have pulled out.
But
so Grace,
for me,
what is your controversial position on it?
So I read Del Roche a few years ago. He's he doesn't really make his position on design terribly clear in the books that I've read. He's kind of like a middle of the ground Christian when it comes to the evolution creation controversy. But he gave an argument against methodological naturalism that I thought was decent. And basically what he says is that if you take science to be the endeavor to find out what's true, if that is your concern as a scientist, and then to consider what methodological naturalism says, it doesn't say that the supernatural doesn't exist. It just methodologically assumes that we should be looking for natural explanations. And so it doesn't say that supernaturalism is false, which means that it could possibly be true according to the criterion. But if science is the search for truth, then that means that you shouldn't be able to just a priori shunt off certain theories if you have already admitted, even if tacitly, that they could be true. Science, if it is the truth, should incorporate all things that could possibly be true in our endeavor to gain understanding. That's
apply that to your car being missing. So what would you do first? What methods of inquiry would you use first?
So with the car scenario, I really hope that anybody who's not a schizophrenic would not automatically start thinking in terms of supernaturalism. In fact, but the reason why I would say that, though, is because I'm a metaphysical naturalist. I'm not just a methodological naturalist. I'm somebody who thinks that there just is no supernatural.
That makes three of us in here. Maybe we should have a go at Danny.
That's three of us.
I have a question.
At the same time.
I have a question. What is a metaphysical naturalist?
It's somebody who thinks it's a naturalist. I was just going to say, for me, methodological naturalism is just a fancy.
No. I know
what you asked. I was getting there.
Okay, sorry.
So I don't make a difference between methodological naturalism. I don't qualify like actual naturalism with philosophical or metaphysical because I don't think it's necessary. Because to me, it's not really to me, to like the whole of the field of philosophy of science, methodological naturalism is not an ideology. It's a method. Hence the term methodological in methodological naturalism. It's a fancy philosophical term for science. So the only naturalism that actually exists as an ideology is naturalism, which is the ideology that all which exists is the natural world and the things inside of it and how it operates and that. So
yeah, I usually just use naturalist. I just use naturalism as well, but there is when I teach my students that Darwin was a naturalist, that's not either.
I still can't believe you're a teacher or a teacher's aide. I don't buy it. Sorry.
Okay. Whatever. I said, you contribute.
I'm just impressed that Danny's here tonight after the aneurysm I just watched him having.
Well, his girlfriend dumped him, so he has nothing else to do.
Oh, come on now. Quit taking the low blows.
What are y'all talking about?
I do want to address what Dressel said. And the first thing is I don't think science is necessarily...
Is it Dressel or Dressel? Dressel Drace.
Dressel Drace, but just call him Drace. I'm sure he would probably prefer to be called just Drace. I could be wrong.
Sometimes I accidentally call him Dreidel.
Dreidel, I made you out to play.
Don't worry, before long you'll probably be calling me things much worse than that.
I asked you a question.
Dickhead.
To respond to Dre's point, I don't think science is necessarily the endeavor to find out what things are true. I don't think that's what science is. I think
that's too broad, I think.
Yeah, I think what's more accurate to say of science is it's a framework that tries to find consistent and predictive structures of the world that can be utilized and that can be refined based upon new evidence and evidence that can
Hey, can I interject real quick? Because I just came in here to make a quick comment, and then I gotta get back to going to sleep because I'm such an old fart. But
sure, I'm gonna step line behind you.
I just noticed that video that was taken down got put back up.
Yeah, I trimmed it out. I trimmed out the offending parts.
So. And I skipped forward and found where Danny came back.
Yeah,
loaded for bear. And that was entertaining enough. But the funniest part to me was that in the middle of that, Dak jumps in and tries to explain to Danny that conversations are a two-way street.
That's literally false.
And people have to actively listen. And I'm just like thinking the whole time he's talking, I'm thinking, physician, heal thyself. And then like somebody else was trying to get in, and he had just got done explaining to Danny that, hey, conversation is two-way street. And then like Jay or Jefferson or somebody tried to talk, and boom, Donald was right over top.
Well, I will say this, John, and that is when you talk to a nihilist, it will always end in a null result being failure.
Wait, who are you talking about?
Nihilist?
Didn't you say you were a nihilist?
Mereological nihilist.
I'm a mereological nihilist.
Hey, did you ever answer my question, Drace, about that author?
Yes, he did. It's in the private chat that you never fucking read.
What is private chat? Oh,
yeah. So
wait, I have a quick question. The video from today, why did you have to remove it and put it back up?
Because Top Dog played that short segment with the hyenas attacking the lion, and PBS.
And, you know,
PBS,
those are some handsome hyenas.
I don't think it was PBS. I think it was BBC.
BBC Studios gave me a copyright strike because.
So anyway, guys, I got to get out of here.
With
Danny, you got to make some changes in your life, or you're going to have a heart attack by 35.
I don't know what that means.
Okay.
Wow, you don't know anything means.
You'll find out.
You don't know what that means. Us old fucks, me and Speed, we're going to get to go to your funeral before.
Yeah, there's a reason why we're still alive.
I mean, I'm
anyway, guys. Have a good night.
Peace out, John.
See you, John.
Good night, John.
All right, so let's get into this a little bit more. So the first thing is about science proving things. That's basically the other topic of conversation that I brought up, and we're kind of already getting into it here when we're talking about whether or not the endeavor of science is to prove things, or the endeavor of science is to find out what's true. So you have that, and then you have just the same issue here of methodological naturalism. So I agree with Leo that methodological naturalism is not an ideology, it's a method. But therein lies the problem, because if it's not an ideology, if you're saying that, supernaturalism could be true, which is a tacit admission based on the fact that this is a method that doesn't deny such things. If you're doing that, and it is the case that science is the pursuit of truth, then I think you start to have a problem with using methodological naturalism as a criterion of science. So maybe the crux of our issue then will turn out to be, is the scientific endeavor, is the point of it to prove things? And I'll go into that shortly about why I think that it is. I mean, like a lot of what's coming out these days in terms of philosophy of science that I see on YouTube, it's been heavily influenced by philosophers of science like Lakatos, Feyerabend, Popper. And I mean, like when you take a look at the case that these guys use, like for example, take Feyerabend against method. This was, I mean, there are certain quotations that you'll read in this book that you just have to wonder whether or not he's trolling you. For example, one of the ways in which he tries to get toward this relativity of methods to basically tear down the idea that science is the pursuit of truth would be by pointing out, like, for example, that the indigenous peoples of the Pacific already knew about certain geographic discoveries that scientists later made. And they knew it because they had frequently turned themselves into birds and flown over the strait in question and seen it for themselves. And because of this kind of cultural relativism that Feyerabend has going on, we ought to accept the account of the quote unquote Maori scientists that they turn into birds and went and observed this for themselves. And their methodology was just as good as the quote unquote Western scientists who practice modern scientific methodology. And
I'm really gonna read against.
I mean, like, now. I don't know.
Oh my!
Anyway. What?
That is by far one of the stupidest arguments I've heard in my life.
What?
Yeah,
who
is
made
really
the argument?
Stupid argument.
I
mean, just consider though that a lot of the philosophy of science that's very popular today, especially that you see going all around YouTube all the time, is based off of guys like this, off of people like Feyerabend and off of people like Popper. And I think that ought to give you some pause for a second to think, well, maybe the way that they've been trying to construe science may be overly modest in certain respects, because they're trying to, for example, in Feyerabend's case, try to play this cultural diversity card where everybody's methods at arriving at the truth is equally valid. But if you reject that notion, which I hope you do, not everybody's methods at arriving at truth are equally valid. There are some methods that work, and there are some methods that don't. And so when you start to recognize things like that, I think that should give you pause and to consider that maybe what science is capable of is a little bit more than what we've been popularly led to believe. And I'll go off on Popper in a second, but I'm going to shut up for a moment just to hear any thoughts that people have on this so far.
Well, okay. First of all, I want to know like what page that's on, because I do need to read against method one of these days.
What are y'all trying to do? Figure out methodological naturalism? Is that what's going on?
I own the book. If I die at midnight, you'll get to read it.
Oh, I hope so. You know what? Don't die yet.
There's motive right there.
Established motive.
So Danny, I think the conversation right now is basically, is methodological naturalism a good or proper criterion for science? And the main objection that's been put so far is against the premise of this argument that suggests that the goal of science is to pursue the truth. And since the critique is
that was the Theist that you were reading?
Oh, yes, he is. Del Roche, he doesn't talk about whether or not, he does, but I mean, not in this particular argument, whether or not science is the endeavor to arrive at truth. He doesn't speak on that with this particular argument about methodological naturalism. His particular argument is that because methodological naturalism is a method and not an actual metaphysical thesis, it tacitly admits that the supernatural is possibly true. And if it's possibly true, and science in turn is the endeavor to find out the truth, then it should not be the case that supernatural explanations should be shunted out of consideration a priori. That's his point.
Yeah, I just take methodological naturalism as just not involving intentional explanations.
So there's a couple things that I would say about this. I would argue that methodological naturalism does not a priori dismiss supernatural things. It's just that number one, most theists would agree that supernatural things can't be measured using science. And number two, science hasn't ever measured a supernatural thing to be able to use it in the future. There's just no precedent for it. It's not just like, okay, we need a way of discovering how the world works, but we're not going to use this at all, so we're just going to take that off the table right now. That's not what it does. It says, okay, what will work? What will allow us to accurately explain the world that we see around us? Let's take a bunch of different things. Let's use them and figure out which ones take us the furthest. And the ones that don't take us very far will slowly, I think, be weeded out. Number two, I don't know if I would necessarily disagree that science is the pursuit of truth. I just don't think that's really a good way of putting science, because to me that implies some faculty of proving things which science doesn't do. To me, science just goes with what works and what fits our observations, and it utilizes the methods that have best demonstrated an ability to bring us to that point. So it can deny, well, not really deny, but it can say we don't really use supernaturalism, but we're not saying it doesn't exist, not because it's doing so a priori, but because there's no precedent for it. It's never been a useful method for bringing us to an understanding of how reality works. I would also agree, though, at least within the framework of methodological naturalism, that doesn't mean it can't. There's always the chance we could stumble upon the thing that is the first supernatural thing that we learn about and establish a precedent for utilizing it to discover things about our reality and how it works. We just haven't done so yet. It's no different than why we don't assume dragons anytime there's something that's involving heat. There's a reason why we don't presume fairies for anything. It's not that methodological naturalists saying, well, we can't use them. It's just that they haven't proven to be useful yet.
Well, y'all don't take. Wait, go ahead. Sorry.
No, that's okay, Danny. I'll get in line behind you. I have a bunch of things. I liked what Leo said there. There are still some points of disagreement, but I'm going to jump in line behind you. You get your thoughts out, and I'll follow up.
I just take methodological naturalism to be excluding any intentional explanation.
Okay, so to go then to a response to both. So with respect to Danny, you're saying that methodological naturalism rules out intentional explanations. I don't think that that's quite accurate. I would say that it rules out supernatural explanations, but there are many different intentional explanations for things that you see in the world around you in terms of like human activity and the activity of other living organisms that science can totally use as a hypothesis.
I don't think
to
that can be
various observations.
But you think that can be disconfirmed or confirmed? And the second thing, I think. Well, what did you say? What was your first point? If you go to you had 2 points. To the second point, I don't think intentional explanations can be confirmed or disconfirmed. And also, what was your first point? There was something that I had to say about that.
Whether or not the endeavor.
You have a concept of the supernatural that I simply don't have. So I want to know what you mean by supernatural.
By supernatural, I mean anything that doesn't have natural characteristics, but would still be said to exist. Something that exists beyond nature.
But do you think that's informative? I don't think that's informative.
I think that that's informative enough for the purposes of our conversation. I think that there's a major problem when it comes to being able to properly understand the meaningfulness of religious language. You don't have to talk about old hat logical positivism or anything like that to try to suggest that there's a problem with the meaningfulness of religious language. But nevertheless, putting that issue aside, I think that we can all at least understand that if you're referring to something that doesn't have naturalistic properties and that exists, outside of that, that is something that, we can refer to as supernatural.
I wanted to answer Jerry's question, I guess, because it's been posted. Intention, I guess one way to define an intention is a state that which is of or about something. That's the classical definition. I think it's easier just to understand it in terms of beliefs and desires and defining those individually, but desire being a subset of belief. But those are normative states which act as standards, right? So if you desire water, that's a standard for success or failure. In the same way that if you believe that there's that it's raining outside, that becomes a standard of truth, right? And a commitment. So that's what I take to be an intention.
I would define magic as being intentional, having something to do with human mind intending, and I would define supernatural. That is a really difficult one because I don't
think it is at all.
I end up with something physical, but not physical in the way that the local laws of this universe work. But anything that would break the local laws that we're pretty much reliant on, the regularity. So it would be a drastic break of symmetry or regularity, and that would be supernatural. But then intentional magic is what Christians talk about when they talk about God creating things. by intent, that sort of thing. So that's how I would define.
I did want to. Never mind. I did want to
throw in there
quickly. I think the best definition for something that is supernatural is that which exists external to and independently of the natural world. And if you would follow up with, well, then how do you define the natural world? I would define that as the whole of contiguous physical space-time reality and its contents.
I define it as this locality, because I can't guarantee that shit's going to work 50, 60 billion light years away, or even into that other thing that we can't measure by timers.
That might be true, but that they would still be natural.
Yeah, it would be subsumed by natural as soon as we found out about it. But for now,
exactly, and that's why I define natural as the whole of contiguous physical space-time reality and its contents.
Okay, yeah, then you're looking to the broader definition, and then something supernatural like a symmetry break. I go into my bathroom and all of a sudden space and time's all fucked. And I sort of, disappear, that sort of thing. That would be something supernatural. But other than that, the kind of supernatural that most people talk about are this intentional magic kind, where somebody can make a rhinoceros appear in space, like right in front of them. Like I can do an incantation, and a rhinoceros will appear, and the air that he displaces will disappear, so that just the rhinoceros appears. That kind of bullshit is supernatural, and I don't see why we ever have to think about it or be concerned about it. It doesn't happen. Don't happen. Can't happen.
The reason people are concerned with it is because places like the Bible is that type of event is alleged to have occurred.
Well, because 3/4 of the fucking human race has gone apeshit fucking crazy, doesn't mean that we have to be concerned with what they're crazy about, do we?
Unfortunately, though, the product of those practices has given rise to where we are now.
Yeah, and sometimes I'm glad I'm going to be off this fucking planet soon. I don't fucking belong here anymore.
You don't have a plan, do you, Steve?
Are you joking?
I don't have a plan. No, I don't.
Are you tired?
No, I'm just going to wait it out. I'm going to wait it out. But you know what? Fuck this place.
By the way, Danny, can you tell me how my definition of natural is question begging?
Because it's just gonna. I'm gonna just ask the question what natural means in that context, or physical.
It means exactly what I defined it as.
I thought you were saying naturalism is, something like if you define.
No, the natural and naturalism aren't the same thing.
So, Danny, case in point.
Right, but if I say something like naturalism is something in which we can predicate natural of every object that exists. Well, okay, but what does natural mean, right? And then if you say, well, that's true. But then if you define it in terms of physical or even material or natural again, right? That's just sort of going to push back the question.
Can I want to just really quick, because on this whole thing of intentionality and science. So, I just wanted to point out that I think that, Danny, I think that you're making a mistake in that you think that methodological naturalism is kind of like equivalent to behaviorism, because behaviorism is really what's saying that you can't invoke, inner mental states or intentionality or things like that to explain things. But if you take a look at the social sciences, if you take a look at economics, if you take a look at history, if you take a look at all those biologists out in the field studying, living populations of other species and stuff, there are countless examples of people having to use intentional explanations in order to explain certain phenomena.
But the explanandum there could also be explained by brains or something.
By what?
Brains.
I don't understand. Well, I would, as a person who's a physicalist, I don't really see any distinction there. But I just would say that in terms of, whether or not scientific theories are allowed to invoke intentions or mental states or things like that, I think that we see that all the time in the social sciences.
I don't really know. I don't think I cash it out that way. But do you think the mind is the brain or something?
I think that basically, the mind is in some sense dependent on the brain. I'm not sure
there could be a dependency relation, but that's consistent dualism.
I'll give
sure. I don't want to. My purpose here isn't to argue against dualism with you. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I'll avoid that conversation the best I can. But let me just give you my view, and then if you think it goes into dualism, then you can continue with the rest of the conversation. But the point is that when I'm drinking Sprite, I'm going to show everyone. I'm drinking Sprite right now. Okay, so all you're seeing right now is the behavior lifting this up and then putting it to my mouth and swallowing or whatever. Okay. Now you're going to say, well, if you might ask the question, why drink Sprite over Dr. Pepper? And I give you some reason, and that reason is apparently an intentional explanation for why I did one over the other. But the point is that you could explain in some other world, you could observe the exact same physical phenomena, and it can just be explained in terms of a disposition in the brain.
I would say that I don't think that that's a distinction with a difference, but regardless of whether or not it is, I would just say that in respect of the sciences, whether or not the question is they can invoke such explanations in order to account for things, I think the answer is yes.
I don't think technically no.
Because this is just my suggestion, because the only time in which you would not be allowed to say that, my preference or my feeling or my thinking on such and such, the only time you're not allowed to say such things is if you're taking a behaviorist approach. That's the only time.
I'm being misunderstood. Look, look, you understand there's some intentional explanation for why I'm talking to you right now, right?
Sure.
Okay. How did you know that?
Because I would assume that you are operating upon the basis of your emotions and interests, and those things are what brought you here to engage in this conversation.
Why? You're philosophically read. Are you familiar with the problem of other minds?
Yeah.
Okay. This is the problem that I'm posing, right? The idea is that you've never seen a mind, not even your own mind, right? You've never heard a mind. You never tested for a mind. You've never weighed a mind, right?
There's a reason for that one too, and that's because the mind is not something that's physical.
The point is that if it's the case that you can't empirically test for the mind, then
we have.
What does a belief look like?
You can empirically.
That makes no sense. How much? How much does Facebook weigh?
How much does Facebook is an idea? It's abstract.
It's abstract.
Yeah, it's not physical.
It's not physical. Facebook isn't physical. Facebook doesn't run on physical machines utilizing physical algorithms where its information is stored on physical servers.
That's not my concept of Facebook.
Well, then you don't know what Facebook is.
Do you think you have to know what H2O is to know what water is?
That's not a proper analogy to what I said.
I'll explain
but with what you just said, it's like asking, do you think you have to know what water is to know what water is? And I would say yes.
If
you're asking if I have to know what the molecular structure of water is to know what water is, well then no.
Do you think the molecular structure of water is identical to water?
Well, of course. Because water emerges out of that physical structure.
Is that analytic or synthetic?
The single molecule of water is not a single molecule of H2O is not a.
Fine, I'm not talking. You can always. I don't understand why you always find the worst interpretation of what I'm saying. You've somehow managed to do that immutable, worse than speed. Think about a cup of water. Okay, let's just talk about that. Now, when a 2-year-old or a 3-year-old, I don't know when they will be able to recognize water. I'm not familiar. I'm not around those human beings. When they say, I want that cup of water, are they referring to H2O intentionally?
They're referring to a collection of H2O molecules, yes.
I'm saying, is their concept of water flawed? So because they don't identify it as H2O?
No, it's a higher order description of what
metaphysically, water and H2O are not identical.
I agree.
In what way?
Okay, Immutable agrees with me, so now we just got to get Leo on board.
Wait, so are methane and CH4 not the same thing?
Well,
is carbon dioxide and CO2 not the same thing?
It depends on your concept.
Is hydrogen chloride and HCl not the same thing?
It depends on your concept, Leo.
Let me ask the following question. If you consider CH4 as a gas, right, does the molecular structure of CH4 it alone can tell you how CH4 is the gas behavior.
No, we're not talking about like explanation here. We're talking about identity, right? What is CH4 identical to? What is gas identical to? These are questions that depend on your concept of such things. Right?
See, I don't know, because I mean, like when you say that though, I can understand a person not identifying water with H2O if they don't know anything about chemistry, but that would not falsify the identity relation. It would just point out that epistemically they're not aware of it.
Exactly.
They don't. Okay, look. So there's two issues here. Do you think people? We didn't discover what molecular structures were until late, the last 300, 400 years at best. Okay.
No, much later.
Much later. Yeah, I'm just saying at best. Like that means like no more than 400 years ago. That's what I meant. Right. You're just so. Maybe it must be me, Mutable, but somehow you misinterpret me. I'm gonna be more careful with my language. Okay, especially with you. Okay. So what I'm trying to say is that people 3,000 years ago had a concept of water, and they knew what water was, right? And it's not like they didn't know what water was up until whenever date we found out about molecular structure. Same with their own self, right? You don't have to know anything about your brain to know of your mind, know your beliefs, know your experiences, you don't have to know any of that, right? So that's to say the concept, right, of water, the concept of mind, the concept of Facebook is detached from what are sorts of predictions that the synthetic identity makes when you say something like water is H2O, or the mind is the brain, or Facebook is just this particular configuration on your computer and software and server, right?
So I would say that they knew what water was, yes, but there are certain things that they didn't know about water, like the H2O thing. And so like they are increasing their understanding when they come to that, when they come to understand the chemistry.
You can add
at the same time, what I'm trying to point out,
you can add to your concept. There's nothing wrong with that. You can add to your concept. That's fine. But I think there's going to be a what? Yeah. Look, you can just tell me. I don't know if you can hear me. You can just tell me. Let me finish, because I don't mind. I don't mind you telling me if we're having a cordial conversation. You said, "Let me finish, Danny," and I'll respect that. Okay. I didn't want to miss something that you said. Okay. But no, the point is that I don't even know what I was saying. So.
Well. I would point out that I would point out that H2O and water are not the same concept. So
what? Yeah, wind chill doesn't affect like matter.
So, I know what I was saying. I can actually
if you set water outside and set it at 32 degrees and then put wind, the water will still register 32 degrees.
Okay, here's a solution right here, Otangelo.
The issue being water describes a property of matter, whereas H2O describes something much
structure.
When we say water is H2O, if that's not metaphysically identical, I agree that there's something sensical.
Okay, I have to ask a question. Why does it matter whether they're metaphysically identical or not? What relevance does that have to our everyday lives?
Because when we're talking, like with respect to Facebook, right? I think that we want to differentiate what explains our phenomena versus the phenomena itself. So when you're telling me my Facebook is a physical thing, right? I don't understand Facebook as a physical thing, right? But you're saying
that Facebook could exist without a physical reality?
Sorry, what?
You're saying Facebook could exist without physical reality?
No, that doesn't follow either.
Then that means it emerges from the physical. It is a part of the physical world.
Wait, do you distinguish emergence and cause?
Yes.
I don't understand why the difference between those two is relevant to the discussion.
What might explain my phenomena might be the physical facts in the world. But to say that emergence is a tricky term, right? And I had recommended that you look into supervenience, right? Because that's the only way that I could make sense of emergence, right? And there are problems with supervenience. So I don't accept emergent views of phenomenal properties.
Well, then you can't.
Can I give
if that's the case, you're going to have a very hard time explaining the properties of water as being from the notion of H2O as a molecule.
Well, I use explanation, right? Or maybe something like predictive expectation. Is that tautology? I don't know. Redundant. So, for instance, when I say H2O is water, I don't mean an identity relation. I'm saying that my concept of water generates the prediction that if you were to zoom in on it, you would expect to see XYZ features and something like that. So like imagine looking at a house from a distance and it was red. Okay. Yeah. And then you got closer to the house. Okay. And you saw bricks. Okay. The point is that the phenomenal qualities are distinct despite, right? But when I'm backing up from the if I'm seeing it as just a red house and I don't see the individual bricks, right? When I'm identifying there is actually different than when I identify when I go up to the house itself and see all the bricks. So if someone were to say that, let's say I had not zoomed in, right? I had not gotten closer to the house, right? And someone said, well, those phenomenal experiences are identical to these other phenomenal experiences that once you go in, right? Well, there's a sense in which that's false, right? Because even if the person's going to accept that the phenomenal experiences that you're having as you back away are going to be different than the ones as when you zoom in, there's a sensical way of understanding that in terms of, look, if you were to go get closer to the house, you would expect to see bricks. And that's how I understand the water is H2O statement, right? That if you were to look further into this cup of water, right, you would expect to see these things, right? But that's not exactly identity.
But the issue I would point out is that, and this is scientific more so than it is philosophical, but it's that one of the contentions here is that you're assuming that I'll call it scale for lack of a better term, but that when you view something on at different scales, you should expect to see the same result. And that's
I've explained this to him before, and I've said that we actually have to correct for that in science, and it's called renormalization.
And that's something.
What did I say that you? What premise do you take to be false in what I'm saying?
There comes to be a point that when you zoom in, so to speak, on a cup of water and start kind of resolving individual molecules, that there's a discontinuity in the kinds of behavior between that fluid you're observing of water and the individual molecules. There is a difference in how those things behave.
Look, do you disagree? I still don't understand the disagreement exactly. Do you disagree that the phenomenal qualities? Go ahead.
Let me say it this way: the types of ways and rules you would use to describe something on a macroscopic scale, like a fluid, do not apply on the microscopic levels you would use to describe it with individual atoms.
Look, do you disagree that the qualities that the phenomenal qualities of the house as you're away from it are distinct from the qualities of when you get closer to that object?
They aren't. One's emergent from the other.
Yes.
Okay, what do you mean by emergent?
The properties of one explain the properties of the other entirely.
Okay, so then that's not identity. Wait, I'm sorry, I missed it. Did you say they were identical, or yes or no?
They aren't identical, but the properties of explain the properties of another.
So that means that if you were to have a term or a concept of the point at which you're zoomed out, that's going to be distinct from the concept as you get closer to the object. So those are, so in the same sense, my concept of Facebook as I'm experiencing it when I post, right? That's what I'm talking about when I say Facebook, right? I'm not talking about what I would expect to see if I were to like look into my computer or look into the server or whatever terms that Leo used.
Oh, okay.
And you still didn't answer my question.
I missed your question, Leo. What was it?
Well, you just answered it with another question. I asked you, does Facebook depend on the physical realm for its existence?
I think that there's a cause-effect relationship at the most. I mean, there could, if there's some sort of relation there, one in which one phenomenon is contingent on another, right? Number one, that's going to be a contingent fact. So the concepts are still going to be distinct despite that truth. And then the nature of that relation is going to be quite tricky, right? It's not going to be an identity relation. We agree that how I'm experiencing Facebook and utilizing Facebook on a kind of macro level where I'm posting and reading posts, right? And then all those facts that you told me about Facebook as being, I'm sorry, I can't regurgitate everything that you said. Those are not going to be identical. So if you were to say one explains the other, that doesn't seem particularly controversial to me, right?
Yeah, that's what I was saying.
Yeah, but I'm saying that when you asked me, is my concept of Facebook physical, or what am I experiencing physical, right? I don't think so, right? Now, is it explained by something non-mental? Presumably, yes, right? And was that? Do we want to call that physical? I think it's sensical to say it. So I had to think through that. Maybe I could have just given you a solid answer that yes, there might be some kind of notion of explanation there. And if that's what you mean by emergence, sure, but that's not what people in the literature mean by emergence of supervenience. They're saying something a little bit more nuanced, right? They don't want to say there's a causal relationship between that which emerges and the thing that is responsible for emerging, for lack of a better word, right? It's not causal, okay? So if it's not causal, I don't see in what sense there's any kind of explanation, right? So unless you're talking about non-causal explanation, well, then that gets even weirder, because usually non-causal explanation only applies to logical connectives and entailments with respect to meaning, right? So I really don't get supervenience or emergence if it's not supposed to be or causal.
Well, the thing is, with something like emergence, it can't be causal because nothing about the system you're describing is changing. But what is changing is the scale at which you're describing it.
Yes.
And
wait, no, but the qualities, the phenomenal qualities are going to be distinct.
Yes, and the reason for that is when you zoom out, so to speak, from like microscopic views, the ways in which you can describe it are allowed to change. There are certain descriptions that become more valid because of how, in terms of physics, how we can describe those properties.
So what's the contention? I'm sorry.
The contention is that it's not causal, but there is no additional thing you're adding to the equation to kind of get this emergent behavior, right?
Let's just start over. Remember what the conversation started. Leo asked me if Facebook was physical,
right?
And then I said no, and then he asked me all the things that sort of explain my concept of Facebook.
Well, they don't explain your concept of Facebook. They explain Facebook, regardless of whether you're phenomenologically experiencing it or not.
Do we have the same concept of Facebook?
I don't know. I would imagine so. It's the same thing.
Well, I just take the sort of like...
But I'm not talking about individual... I'm not talking about subjective concepts of Facebook. I'm talking about Facebook.
Yeah, I know you said the word Facebook. Look, it's like saying computer screen and pixel and the number of pixels on the screen. I think those are distinct, right?
If I can throw in some things here to Danny and to Leo, following up on our conversation on methodological naturalism. So I'm going to try to throw all this out there as quick as I can. So Danny is he's kind of skeptical about the idea of emergence or supervenience. So the way that I understand this is that when we're referring to consciousness, we're referring to activities of the brain, which is why I hesitate to make an identity relation between the activities and the brain itself. And to give you an example of recent books that have put forward evidence for this, you have Stanislas Dehaene put together this little experiment where basically he shows an image to somebody and he sees that it registers in the visual visual apparatus.
I saw that.
Okay, so yeah. All right, so did you check into him enough to where he starts talking about how when you introduce an element in the visual information that disrupts the functional threshold time for the visual part of the brain to send that information to other areas of the brain, if he interrupts that process, there's no corresponding conscious experience. And so I can
grant that. I'm not talking. That doesn't have anything to do with intentional.
It does have something to do, because the thing is that it's a common physicalist mantra that nothing mental happens without something physical happening. And so when you come up with experiments like this that can show that if you do not have that physical interaction between different areas of the brain, you do not get the conscious experience, I think that's actually good evidence for that.
I don't think that argument commits you to physicalism, though. I think something else.
You walked on the end of that. I wish you hadn't.
But I also, I also don't see how you can say that that a set of mental states aren't explained by physical states or that they're somehow distinct from each other.
There's a causal interaction between the physical and the mental.
Without, let me say it this way. In my view, without physical states, you wouldn't have mental states.
Well, I agree there's a dependency relation, but that's not emergence.
But see, if there's a dependency, if there's a dependency relation, I don't understand then how you're not talking in terms of causality there. Maybe you can like explain how there can be a dependency relationship, but it's not a causal relationship, because you were suggesting that, I think, before.
I'm going to try to use this example, and if it doesn't work, then I'll use an example that probably more complicated, but I know that definitely works. If there's a line, there's a direction, or there's a dimension, right? But it's not like a line would emerge from a dimension, right? But the idea is that the
emerge from the line.
Sorry, what?
I said the dimension would emerge from there being a line.
The dimension. So without the line, there would be no dimension?
No.
Okay, wait. But is it on your view? You just said that dependency and emergence, on your view, are interconnected, right?
Actually, what Leo said earlier is correct. The dimension emerges from a line.
Okay. So that means that. Okay. So when he said no, and to the question of whether if there's a line, there's no dimension. Can I get another answer to that then?
A line.
Wait, what?
Could you have a dimension with no lines?
Could you have a dimension with no lines? Mathematically, yes.
Okay, but if there's a line that comes with a dimension.
Yes, has to.
Okay, but that's not emergent. The dimension is not emergent from the line.
Well, I wasn't trying to get into technicalities. I was just speaking from the hypothetical that you were proposing.
Okay, just look. The idea is that the line depends on there being a dimension, but the dimension does not emerge from the line, right? It's not like the line explains the dimension, or even there's no causal interaction, but there's a dependency relation between the line and the dimension.
Yeah, I just don't really care. We're so far past your hypothetical, it's not relevant.
Well,
okay. Well, if you're not interested in the conversation, I'll drop it.
Are you talking about?
Okay.
Maybe let me use Kant's example then. I'll just use Kant's example. Kant thought cognition came with experience, but not from experience.
That what now? Say again.
Kant thought that cognition came with experience, not from experience.
Okay.
That experience, or we can think about experience in terms of the world, right? That for there to be, in other words, a point of view, there must be that which is being viewed. But that doesn't imply, right? That doesn't imply a dependency relation of the kind like a emergent or causal one. Right.
So what you're given there, though, is an example of how there can be causation without a dependency relation. But what I'm looking for is right. Well, see, that's the thing, is that I'm looking for a dependency relation that has absolutely nothing to do with causes. And so, I mean, maybe I just misunderstood the Kant's example there, but I thought that the way that you described it.
Did you dispute my line example? Did you dispute my line example?
With the line example, my problem is, like, the way that I would understand it is that the dimension would have to exist first before you can have any like physical line there. If you don't have a dimension at all, then there isn't going to be any line or anything. And
I can grant that. There's nothing wrong with that. But the point is that if you're saying that though, then there is. Because if you're saying that, okay. Does the line depend on dimension for its existence?
I would say yes.
Yes. Is there a causal relation? Is there a causal relation?
There's a causal relation in the sense that, like, that dimension, if you didn't have that, then the line could not exist.
Look, wait, but that's not a common understanding of causation, right? Look, if you
could have it. Well, counterfactual analysis of causation is pretty common, and that's pretty much what that is.
Well, then something like, do you think that if you had asked me, Danny, why are you talking with me right now, and I said because of the Big Bang, do you think you would accept that as an answer?
I mean, it is an answer.
It is an answer. It's just the reason why that's not an appropriate answer is because it doesn't give you like the actual specifics that you're looking for, in terms of that question. You know what I mean? Like, is it the case that like the Big Bang caused Danny to be here talking about philosophy? The answer to that question is yes. But at the same time, I'm not asking you about what happened 14 billion years ago when I ask you that question. I'm asking you about what happened tonight that brought you here to the chat. And so, I mean, but look, think about it counterfactually, right? If you understand causation if you ask the question, what explains or what caused why? If you're saying that the sufficient condition there is just to understand it counterfactually, that if X didn't happen, Y didn't happen, then I mean, that doesn't seem to like get at the question. Now, maybe it's not a good example. I am thinking about it. You're saying something like, what was the most approximate cause or something like that? I don't know.
Are you talking about supervenience?
No, I reject supervenience. Right.
Okay. For the mind, basically, the thing is that with the line and the dimension, you're talking about something that sort of intrinsically happens at once. It's of one nature, that sort of thing.
So could you have a dimension? Could you have a dimension with no lines?
That's what I mean. It's of one nature.
You can.
Okay. So that means that if you have a dimension with no lines, and then suddenly there was a line, right? Yes. There's a dependency relation between the line and the dimension, right. But there could, in terms of that, it's supervenient.
Basically, it's sort of a one-way emergence. But the thing is, with the line and dimension, you're talking about something.
I don't think you and I agree on what supervenience means. I know what the philosophers are saying. I don't know what you mean.
Okay.
What do you mean?
If something, if A varies, what the hell? If A supervenes on B, then A.
There can be no change in A unless there's a change in B.
Well, then that's a big problem on your view because the dimension can change, right? That's to say, I can add another line, right? But there wouldn't be a change.
Yeah, but you're shitting on the whole concept and taking it into abstract mathematics. I mean, there's no. Adding another dimension, I don't think you're going to get away with that.
No, not adding. No, I didn't say that. I didn't say that. I said if you add another line to the dimension, is the dimension? Oh, I see what I think you interpreted me as. Did you say? So you said that that if there's a change, like let's say I add a line to a dimension, you're saying there's no change in the dimension? Is that what you're saying?
If A supervenes B, there could be no change in A without some corresponding change in B.
So let's put it this way.
Doesn't make any sense.
Let's put it this way: if zeroth dimensional space is just a point, right? So it's a point that of any size. If you were to change the size of that dot arbitrarily, you would not change the dimension itself.
Okay, here we're going to make this. I don't mind. I'm not changing the subject. I'm just going to give a better argument. Because maybe I'm not well equipped to. I was trying to use examples and analogies to try to convey the difference between dependency, supervenience, and emergence and causation. But I'm just going to give us an argument, right? Okay.
All right.
So when we're talking about a mind, we're talking about a point of view. The idea of a point of view is that there's an object in which that is being viewed. So anytime there's a point of view, right, and there are views, there are things that are being viewed, or there's a view of something else. So that's to say, there's a relation of necessity between a point of view and that which is being viewed, which is the world. So that's to say, a mind or a point of view is, for lack of a better word, because I know it's problematic, depends on the world existing. You couldn't just have a point of view and have no world. This is an argument against the existence of God, right? The idea of a disembodied mind is problematic, right? Because presumably if the mind has no views, right, and in virtue of what would it be a mind, right? If it has views, then there's some object that is being viewed, in which case it's a world. So you couldn't have God existing prior to any kind of observable or object or body, right?
I think that's correct.
Okay, so that's...
Can I ask this question in that case? Does the view exist independent of the viewer?
I don't know what a viewer is.
So a person that has a perception of the view, right?
Let me think about it.
Yeah.
It's the same question.
Are you a Humean? I think I'm a Humean with respect to what it means to be a viewer, right? Like Hume, when he introspected, defined himself, right? He said, "Look, I can find all these impressions, my qualitative experience, my beliefs, my desires." He used the other technical language I'm not going to get into. I don't even remember. But he basically said something like this, "But I don't see me. What is this I? I don't see it. I just see views. I just see desires. I just see impressions of the world. But there is no thing that is me." So I'm a Humean. So when I say there's a viewer, I just mean there's a set of views. So I'm a Humean.
In that case, all right. In that case, let me phrase it this way: does that collection of desires and beliefs and whatever else you want to lump in with that, is that collection dependent on the view?
Wait, I don't understand the question. Are you asking me if the set of views depend on views?
So he's trying to get at if I go ahead.
I'm trying to ask you if your views about what you're viewing, right?
Yeah. Okay.
Exist independently of the view itself.
Wait, no. Views and that which is being viewed are distinct things.
Yes.
But they're dependent.
I would argue not.
Well, then there's no such thing as a set of views.
I would let me argue. I would argue that you can't coherently view one without the other.
That's what I'm saying.
Right.
I'm saying it's dependent. Maybe I misunderstood you. Here's my claim again, just to be sure that we understand each other. I'm saying that it makes no sense to say there's a view or a belief. If it's not of something else outside the belief.
All right. I'm going to jump in here for just a second.
What the fuck are you guys talking about?
I'm saying let me just say real quickly. I'm just saying that the thing you're viewing relies upon the viewer for its properties.
Oh, you're an idealist of some sort? Like that's like a Berkeleyan idealism. That there are big problems.
He's not trying to say that. I think he's trying to work with you in terms of the whole mereological nihilism thing you have going on with Hume, in terms of like taking a look at particular sensations and things like that, and saying, well, I see these sensations, but I don't see a unified I. And so what he's trying to do is he's just trying to say, like, well, okay, let's just say that there isn't a unified I. Let's just define the unified I as this collection of views and impressions and stuff like that. The composite, all right, is what we're talking about. And so he's asking you, in terms of the composite, like, could these things exist without the composite being there? I think is what his question is to you. It's pretty much the same question as what Leo.
It seems like it follows that there's a composite. There's a composite.
There's a composite, but the question is that the view that you're having, is that dependent on the composite being there first? Can there be a view without there being that composite?
Oh, I see. No. I get the question now. Look, I get the question now. Here's why. A view necessarily implies other views, because views are propositional and they consist of other concepts. In order to have a view of a proposition, you have to have other concepts which entail other views. So let me give you an example. If I believe that it's raining outside, I have to have a concept of rain, the outside, right? And that's going to apply other views. So the idea of the composite, you're right. It's not a set of things that are somewhat independent, right? It's actually interconnected, because if I believe that it's raining outside, I have all other sorts of a network of commitments about if that's true, right? If you believe that you should go to college, you have to believe what college is, about finishing something that would get you to college. You have to view about yourself. You have to view this. Yet there's all the idea is that it's a network, right? So the composite, it's not simply a set. I'm sorry for being unclear about that. It's a set in which the things are interconnected.
And since there's interconnected, there is a dependency relation there.
Well, no, but you can fail. That's the interesting about an agent, right? Now, well, it's tricky. I think there's so like if I believe that it's raining outside, I could actually still believe that it's not raining outside, right? I would be failing though. So
Sure.
the idea is that maybe I'm not understanding you, but the point is that in terms of the nature, like it's not. I wouldn't say that my belief that there's water outside depends on my belief that it's raining outside, because I could fail to think that there's water outside. So the nature of the dependency relation is not such that if I believe that it's raining outside, that necessitates the belief that there's water outside. I think that's what I'm trying to say.
Sure, I can agree with that. People can mistakenly think wrong things all the time, even in spite of whatever impressions they're getting.
But I think what you're getting at, I know what you're getting at, because there is a necessity with respect to a belief and other beliefs. And I don't know how to describe the necessity exactly, right? The point is that there can't be one belief in isolation. That doesn't make any sense on my view, right? Because like I said, if beliefs are understood propositionally and propositions are understood in terms of concepts, then you're going to have the concepts to have an attitude of that proposition. I think that's the best. That's as far as I can go.
I have one last question for you, and then I have some comments drawing back to the original conversation topic. But my last question is, hold on. Let me see if I can just remember what just slipped out of my head. What was it? No, I can't remember it right now. I'm going to have to try to think of it and butt in again later. Let me just, I'm going to think about that and get back to you in a second, Danny. With respect to the methodological naturalist conversation, I had some further points to throw in there. So going back to what to the room to the room at this point, because I'm gonna incorporate Leo into this conversation based on the last thing that he said. So I mean, like, you know, Leo was saying that methodological naturalism doesn't shunt off supernaturalism a priori. Rather, what it's doing is that, you know, as time goes on, you know, it's asking the question of, you know, what works well as a way of explaining things. And as you continue on in that investigation, you see increasingly that supernaturalism does very badly and naturalism does very well. The problem, though, is that I don't think that that's really the way that methodological naturalism is construed. And that because when it's construed, it usually is a methodological criterion that sets up a priori what can be called science and what isn't. And when you start to involve yourself in that quest that you were talking about like, you know, what is a good program for explaining things, that is an a posteriori endeavor to figure out what makes sense and what doesn't. And so I think that at the end of your journey, if you find out that naturalism works really well and supernaturalism sucks, what you've effectively done, instead of shunting it out a priori as a criterion of science, what you've done instead is you've actually falsified supernaturalism to the extent that it really sucks as an explanation for anything. So I just want to throw that out there as some ideas to consider. And the last thing that I want to say is on the whole question about whether or not the proper endeavor of science is the pursuit of truth. And so the thing, and this gets into whether or not science can prove anything. And I think that a lot of the conversation about whether or not science can prove something uses a definition of prove that is really appropriate mostly to mathematics. It's this very, very stringent QED notion of prove. But there are other senses of the word prove that are equally legitimate. Like take, for example, how we prove things beyond a reasonable doubt in the court of law. This is a perfectly substantive notion of prove that we've had around for a really long time. And my question would be, does science prove things in that sense? And I think the answer is a very clear yes. As a matter of fact, that's how our court procedures work nowadays in terms of introducing all sorts of different scientific evidence to prove something beyond a reasonable doubt. And so those are my thoughts there, and whatever anybody has to say in terms of that, I'm all ears.
I would say, well, one, I agree with you with what you said about naturalism and supernaturalism, and at some point you've just effectively falsified naturalism. That's or falsified supernaturalism. I actually take that view. I think that the scientific methodologies, amongst others, have effectively falsified supernaturalism, and that's just one of the reasons, stacked on many others, that I think supernaturalism just straightforwardly doesn't work. With what you said in regards to science proving things, I agree. I would state that, where the fuck did speed go? I would state that general relativity has been effectively proven. I've often said that, or at least thought that, science does effectively prove things in the sense that there's no reasonably founded doubt for it, but we just don't say that it does because of the nature of science.
The nature of science in the sense that it is open to correction, that it can change over time, things like that. Yes.
Exactly.
Yeah, and I understand, and that's really where the motivation for this kind of modesty in philosophy of science nowadays has come from, in terms of recognizing that science can change, in terms of improving our understanding on things and stuff like that. My only point there is that I would say that when we're changing things, of course, we're changing them because we have gained a better appreciation of the evidence, or more evidence, or something like that. And so I would understand that as us moving closer to the truth, which is still in line with the whole endeavor of, is science pursuing it? And I would argue that shift that you're talking about right there is exactly that endeavor expressing itself. Because we're not interested in holding to the old, outmoded idea anymore. We're interested in tracking what's true. And because now we have more evidence to lead us in that direction, that's what we're following now. You see what I mean?
Yeah, and I think a good example is this stylus. It's actually called an Apple Pencil, but it's a stylus. Is made of atoms. I would argue that that's proven. It doesn't. We could improve our understanding of science to the best that is physically possible in reality, and the statement that this stylus is made of atoms will still be true. I would argue that the pursuit of truth is sort of a second order goal of science. It's sort of something that I don't think science sets out to do, but just happens to do with what it sets out to do, which would be to provide accurate and consistent physical descriptions of the reality that we observe around us. But in doing so, you will find truth in certain things. So coming to truth is sort of wrapped up in the actual goal of science. So I wouldn't really separate that from science, but I wouldn't necessarily argue that it's the primary goal. But that's just my opinion on the matter.
Yeah, I understand that. I mean, like, even though there are some differences there between your and my approach, I think that it's good that at least we agree that truth is mixed up in there somewhere. It's not. Oh yeah, definitely. We're not going down like a complete anti-realist road saying that has absolutely nothing to do with the truth. Which I think would be, if that was true about science, then I think that science would be completely worthless, and we might as well just throw it into the garbage tomorrow.
Well, that doesn't. What would be worthless? That doesn't follow. Yeah. Okay. Immutable. We agree on something. Oh my God, that doesn't follow.
What doesn't follow?
We agree on more than you think, Danny. Just wait.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. No. If you're an anti-realist, you might think it's worth doing science.
Right. You might think that it's worth doing science, but I don't think that any grounds that you could give for doing science would really work out. Because if science is not concerned at all with what the facts of the matter are, or what's true, or anything like that, then it's completely divorced from reality. And if it's completely divorced from reality, then other than your own fantasies and subjective entertainment, I don't see what real value science could have.
Oh, well, no. But value is understood in terms of a subject.
I mean, the thing is, like, we could be brains in a vat, right? And
here we go. Yeah, we went to solipsism.
No, I mean, it could be very elaborately construed as if to appear that the world operates in a very clock-like way and routine. And, that could turn out to be false. It could be a very complex algorithm that determines that, right? But it would still be useful for us in the sense that, hey, for the sake of us, like for the intention of human beings and how we function, it works well enough, right? It's an approximation of the world to an arbitrarily close or accurate sense as we want to get, right?
Would you say, though, that your description right there, like, doesn't that sound to you as if, like, the purpose of it then is the pursuit of truth? Because what you're doing there is you're trying to approximate. The whole point is verisimilitude, right? Truth likeness. You're trying to get as close to there as you possibly can. And I think that what you just described is exactly that.
You might take, there's a lot of moves here. One of the moves I might take, though, is just to take a pragmatic theory of truth. That would be one thing. So then you would be going for the truth if you're going for what's like, for lack of a better word, practical. There are two kinds of pragmatic theories of truth. There's the epistemic and non-epistemic. But the point is that if you construe truth in terms of a subject, then you escape your objection. The other move is just to say that, look, what science is about is what's most practical in terms of naming, testing, explaining, blah, blah, blah.
Well, explaining would still lead us down that whole thing about, is the explanation true, and the value of that explanation if it's not true. But I do want to say that with respect to the whole like pragmatic versus truthfulness kind of thing, I'm really skeptical that you can draw a distinction there. And this kind of gets also into Alvin Planning.
Between what? The distinction between
what's pragmatic and what's true. The utility of something versus its objective factuality. And so, like you take Alvin Planning, right, who has his evolutionary argument against naturalism, and he tries to make this dividing line between what's good for survival versus what's true, because it's about natural selection, reproduction, and the whole Darwinian dynamic. And so he wants to make this dividing line to the point where what's true and what's reproductively successful are two entirely different things. And therefore, you can't trust your cognitive faculties because there's no relevance to the truth. And I don't think that that's appropriate at all, because the only way in which you're going to be able to live practically and be successful, survive, flourish, is if you have an understanding of the world in which you live. And
I don't think that's true.
I do think it's
I do. I think it is true.
Y'all don't think that like false beliefs could lead to survival and reproduction more so in certain environments than?
Well, yes, in specified examples, yes, but I don't think that would hold true overall.
What's the argument for that?
The fact that it hasn't.
Oh my God, that's not an argument, Leo.
But it kind of is, though, because humans are the demonstration.
What form is it, Leo?
Humans are the demonstration that understanding the world as it actually is leads to greater reproductive success than not. That is why the fact that we understand the world as it is has made us the single most successful species that's ever existed on the face of this planet, as far as we are concerned.
Let's put it this way: humans are the only species we know of that are able to cure our own blindness. There are many false beliefs we had about the world when humans were very young and getting used to this planet, the Earth being flat and all sorts of other wild things. But
yeah, I just don't see this as I don't know. Are you responding to me or Leo?
I think he's just speaking generally.
Well, do y'all want to talk about this, or you want to move on to maybe more of what Drace has to say? Because I think there's a lot to contest there.
Yeah, I would just I would give one last argument on this topic, which is that if you think that you can make that distinction between what's useful and what's true, it's just that in order for you to survive, you have to be able to appropriately react to your environment. If you're not reacting to your environment appropriately, the odds of your survival are going to go down. And so, I mean, like my point here. Well, if it's a tautology, then so much the better, because it's my main point here is that if you are not recognizing the truth about your environment and instead you're believing all sorts of false things, you're not going to be able to respond to it appropriately because your conception of what it is completely mistaken.
What's the that doesn't follow. I mean,
I think it does.
What? Okay. Can we put it in premises form? Because I know there's nothing going to become of that argument.
Okay, I'll try to, off the top of my head, put it into a premise-like form.
Syllogism?
A syllogism. So, I mean, let's try to do this off the top of my head. Premise one.
Just put it in narrative form, and I'll try to do it in my head again. I'll try. If you want to put it in narrative form.
All right, would you agree that the odds of your survival in a particular environment is going to increase if you understand that environment and decrease if you don't understand the environment at all. Do you agree with that? Yes or no?
I disagree.
Okay, so can you describe to me, like perhaps for example, we can take Alvin Planning as example that he uses of the person who wants to pet the tiger, but instead, but he believes wrongly that in order to pet the tiger, he has to run in the opposite direction. And so he ends up surviving because he's running away, even though his cognitive faculties are all screwed up. And he thinks that he wants to pet this tiger, and the way to do it is to run away. So, I mean, like, we have this scenario where there's a complete distinction between a person's actions and their comprehension of their environment. Now, I ask you, do you think that such a person could continue to survive indefinitely in the world operating on that kind of procedure?
It just depends on the context.
That is a good point.
There are no laws
Grace.
about that.
Doesn't matter.
If there are no laws, then it's just the answer.
Okay, so let me ask you another question, Danny. Would you agree that the observed and obvious success of humans in their survivability is directly correlated to their better understanding of the reality in which they live, to better respond to it, to increase the chances of success in survival?
Well, that's not going to be explained in terms of...
it's kind of a closed-ended question. Yes, I do, or no, I don't.
Can you repeat the question?
Do you think that the reason humans have been so successful in survival is correlated to the fact that, or is correlated to us having a better understanding of the world in which we live, and thus being able to better respond to it?
No, not simply
Okay,
that.
so then why do you think humans have been so successful in survival?
Wait, I'm asking for an argument. Do you want me to argue for my position, or are you going to try to argue for yours?
I think I've already done so successfully, honestly.
What's the argument? What was it? Modus tollens? A hypothetical syllogism?
You do know that not every argument has to be presented.
Give me the narrative form, and I'll put it in the right form for you.
You do know that not every argument has to be presented in a formal form.
What did I just say? Give me the narrative form so I can help you put it in the form so we can understand.
I think it's already been given that the better.
Okay, if you're not interested in talking to me, let's just move on to the next topic, Trace.
You keep interrupting me and refusing to let me actually explain anything. So of course you're not hearing anything that I'm saying because you keep interrupting me. As I was. Now you threw me off topic. Now I don't even know where I was going to start.
I want an argument.
An argument.
So
you're making
so I mean, like,
that
with
there's some correlation between understanding and survivability. I want the argument.
Okay, understanding and survivability. So basically, understanding is that relationship between an organism and the environment that correlates. So there's correlation and regularity. That is it. That's all there is. That understanding, you can call it truth. You can puff it up with all kinds of philosophical bullshit, but it's basically a relationship.
You're not interested either. Who's interested?
Okay, fucking interrupting
the
me.
Thing is, go ahead.
Just do what you do
There's
best.
a relationship between the environment and the organism, and that relationship is what we call an understanding. Okay, and that's how we reason. And all of this stuff that you're talking about with truth and correspondence and all that shit, it all boils down to a simple organism responding to its environment in a regular way. And we call that understanding. And that understanding can be called truth. If you get
That's
it
not
right.
what Drace meant.
If you get it right, it's called truth.
You're just talking about something different. Drace meant something different than what you're talking about.
Speaking for
I think Grace was
talking about
the lion. He was talking about the lion, basically.
No, he's talking about Alvin Planning's argument against naturalism. He's talking about the causal tendency of true beliefs with respect to survivability. I don't know what the hell.
Okay, Grace, were you talking about the fucking immutable left? That son of a bitch. Grace, were you talking about? Okay, if you give me the Plantinga basically. He had an argument against naturalism, and you were talking about how it broke, how that argument is not valid, right? Or is that?
Yeah, and I think the way you described it, I think the way that you described my position is pretty much on top of things. Like I would hesitate to use the term regularity, but I understand, I think, what you mean by that, and I'm happy to go with it.
The way that he defined understanding was not in terms of belief, Trace.
Well, he described it in terms of a correlation between how the organism sees things and the way that the environment
actually want to get Plantinga's argument right? Plantinga is talking about true beliefs versus false beliefs and their causal tendencies, right? Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
And I'm boiling it down.
Well,
I'm boiling it down to a relationship between an organism and the world.
You're just equivocating.
Better than the world.
The
belief is subsumed by that.
Point out that he won't listen to me. He won't listen to me. So point out that he's just talking about something different.
Well, I mean, the thing is that I don't think that he's really talking about anything different. I think that he's.
You think that's
from
what
what I'm
Plantinga
understanding.
You think
No,
that's what
because the
Plantinga
thing is, I'm bringing up. Hold on there, just 1 second. I'm sorry, Danny. I just want to say that the only reason I'm bringing up Plantinga is to illustrate my main point about the relationship between survivability and being able to understand the truth. And I'm trying to illustrate that through a criticism of Plantinga, because his argument relies on the idea that there is a distinction that you can make here, and so that's why.
Right.
Can I try something really quick? I just want to ask you, and these are just close-ended questions, yes, no, or I don't understand. For you, Danny, wouldn't unguided natural selection produce adaptive behaviors?
What do you mean by behavior?
Behavior in the biological sense.
Based on my understanding of behavior,
evolution,
yes.
Okay.
Based on my definition of behavior, yes. Now, if you are actually interested in the conversation, you're going to ask me what I mean by behavior.
No, because you just agreed with me, so I'm assuming that
we probably don't mean the same thing. You're just not interested in a good conversation.
Well, I actually am. You just want to nitpick.
I have a very nuanced definition of behavior.
Define what behavior means in biology.
In biology?
Yes.
I don't know what they mean.
Problem. You refuse to understand what a word means within the context that it's being used.
Then tell me what it means.
Opting instead for, I probably couldn't really give that good of a definition for behavior in biology, but the things that we do to aid us in survival.
If that's how you define behavior, I think that a natural process could explain that.
Okay, so you, like I said, you agree with me.
You have to be careful.
And in order for these behaviors to span across time, must they not correspond with the way the world is?
Repeat the question.
In order for these behaviors to span across time, mustn't they correspond with the way the world is?
I don't understand the question.
If you wanted these behaviors to stay in place, to elongate, so to speak, wouldn't they have to correspond with the way that the world actually is, the way that reality actually is and operates?
This is a behavior. What does it mean that it corresponds?
But that's not what behavior means in biology. Again, we're using a specified definition.
This can help me survive?
No.
You don't think this can help me survive?
Like digestion is a behavior that helps you survive.
Okay, let's use that example. I'm digesting. What does that mean in terms of reality?
So digestion doesn't follow like what the laws of physics do and everything like that? And that doesn't explain why it's elongated through time?
Okay, if that's what you mean by you're just saying that like something like a behavior like digestion, that's explained by like nature or something, or that is natural?
No, I'm asking you that if these behaviors that are adaptive, that allow us to survive,
okay,
if they continue, they would have to correspond to reality.
I don't know what that means.
So you don't know what something means for it to correspond to reality?
No.
Okay, hold on. Hold on. Speed. Can I ask you some questions?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. Wouldn't unguided natural selection produce adaptive behaviors?
Yes.
And in order for those behaviors to span across time, mustn't they correspond with the way the world is?
Yes.
Okay. Then, so long as our evolved faculties were the products of adaptive behaviors over a vast span of time, this raises the likelihood that their beliefs are true. Thus, they're reliable.
Yes.
Boom.
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe
the evolutionary argument against naturalism just doesn't fucking work.
Well, I don't accept the second premise. I don't even know what it means.
Well, I can't help you.
You can help me? Then let's move on, Drace.
I would try to understand. Well, it wasn't a premise; they were just questions. And he's saying that in order for these behaviors, the adaptive behaviors that are the process of unguided natural selection, in order for them to span across time, in order for them to stay useful in some living organism, they would have to correspond to the way that reality actually is.
Okay, there's something that there's something that you may not be getting, Danny, about what I was saying. I'm saying that relationship between the organism and the environment is the basis of all these words we have: belief and intention and understanding and all that stuff. It all comes from that simple natural physical relationship between
I reject that
environment. I know you do, because you'd be out of a fucking job if you didn't.
I don't know what. Yeah, you're just not a serious interlocutor.
Oh, fuck
That's not what I think the problem is.
I'd be at.
You keep wanting to go to this fucking meta conversation, Danny, and it gets a little irritating. Now, I made a very, very serious comment about something that is a very deep subject that we could explore, and you want to fucking dismiss me right away with this, I don't understand it, I'm not a serious interlocutor. So stop fucking doing it.
No, you said that I would be out of a job. What are you talking about?
Somebody said something about for a guy who doesn't like the meta conversation.
I'm not. This is not meta conversation.
Bring it up every 15
now
minutes.
It is. Now it is because of you.
Yeah, now it is because
you told me I would be out of a job because I don't understand. What are you talking about, you idiot?
So people are idiots now.
So I mean, this conversation could go on for a while. I had my last one here, which is Jesus mythicism, which is a totally different subject. But if you guys have anything else you'd like to discuss, have at it. If not, I have Jesus mythicism on the table, so we can go with that if you guys like to.
Why did you comment about me not getting a job? And then if you talking about the meta. You dishonest.
Okay. Are you on the fucking spectrum? Are you autistic?
No, I'm calling you a dishonest fuck because you said that I think you do a meta.
I think Danny is autistic. Do you think he's autistic? He didn't get the fucking joke or the offhand comment.
No, I really do, and I don't mean that as I mean that as somebody else.
You got it right, Leo.
I definitely think that I wouldn't, and maybe he has been tested. And I'm really not saying this to be offensive. I'm saying this because why would you not want to know if it's possible? But I have noticed that there are certain, what's the term? Social cues and social concepts that see, this is the thing. I don't know.
He doesn't get my offhand fucking humor.
I don't know.
He's going fucking nuts because I made a little joke.
For me, I don't.
I can't handle it. You can't get out of your stream because you can't handle it.
No, right? You keep coming in and interrupting people when they're talking.
Well, I don't care. Why should
no. So, wait.
You don't care. Okay, you don't care.
Hold on. Let me point this out. He's telling us that we're not interested in a serious conversation, but then he doesn't care if he's interrupting other people, which is destroying.
Anyway, what I was saying was I was trying really hard to understand y'all, and then he makes a stupid offhand comment about you're out of a job, and that's and about something not understanding. And while I understand whether it was a joke or not, it's inappropriate when I'm really trying.
Okay.
You can't drop it. If you can't fucking drop that, we're gonna end the stream for the night. Until you fucking cool off and go think a little bit. What do you think, guys?
Sure, yeah. It's almost midnight. It's almost midnight here, and I do want to eat a little food.
Yeah, and Dre's to tackle another topic at this point is almost impossible. So
no problem.
Yeah, okay.
The stream's kind of gone to shit.
But Dre's, you got my little joke right about him being out of a job.
Yeah, I mean, just like pointing out that philosophers, like to create trouble wherever they can, I guess. And if you can't create trouble,
but it wasn't quite that. If we understood philosophy, if we sketched out all of philosophy in terms of naturalism, I think the way I just did, it would eliminate a whole lot of fucking philosophical problems. And I think philosophers could then get onto something more meaningful, like metaphysics and things that, instead of this fucking constant hashing around the words like belief and truth and fucking correspondence.
Well, I mean, for Christ's sake, I asked him a question that was obviously within the framework of biology, and then he asked me what I mean by the term behavior. Because he's explained why he does that, and I do get it. You want to try your best to understand the basics of what somebody is saying, but I would argue that there are instances where people are using words where you just can read what the context of the word is by looking at the greater context in which it is being applied.
I mean, you end up going in circles with epistemology and all of these, there's Klein and Putnam and fucking Donaldson, and they went on and on and on. And did they ever get anywhere?
I do like epistemology. I think it's one of the better aspects of logic.
I guess as long as it's approached analytically, but Jesus Christ.
Yeah, it has to be approached.
I mean, this galloping from one fucking subject and worldview to the other, it just gets very, I don't know, fucking boring.
Yeah, I mean, when it comes to this with philosophy, you don't really see a lot of progress with respect to a lot of different things. But that's, I mean, the field might be that way. I would just say that a person who gets involved with philosophy and they want to go about it in as deep and as intense a way as they can, I think that person can walk away with a much greater understanding of things.
Yes.
If they do that, even though the field as itself, just because, you have this constant back and forth battle between people who just never want to admit that their pet theory sucks. And that's just the way that it always goes in philosophy, because you can't, a lot of the time, you can't set up a definitive test like you can in certain scientific situations.
Yeah, and modern philosophers are doing a whole lot more than this kind of bullshit these days. If you look into it, like object-oriented philosophy and the philosophy of biology, that's with all
the philosophy of neuroscience, the philosophy
and metaphysics. There's a whole lot of new stuff. It's just that it's pretty much solved a whole lot of these problems.
The other thing is, a lot of especially scientists, like physicists and biologists and whatnot, and neuroscientists are coming back into there was a period, I would say maybe in the 80s throughout the early 2000s where philosophy was kind of benched. People like Stephen Hawking, people like Dawkins, we don't need philosophy. I see a big resurgence. Look at people like Sean Carroll, look at people like Sabine Hassenfelder in physics that are really diving into the philosophical underpinnings of it. You see that a lot in biology. You actually do see that quite a bit in physics. You see that a lot in neuroscience. But they're not splitting hairs over what each and every little individual word means and how it could be used in every particular context and things like that. They're just kind of, I don't want to say going with the flow and just kind of, moving with things, but in a sense they kind of are. They're taking the philosophy, applying it to other things and figuring out what's the best way forward to truth.
Hawking and Dawkins or whoever pushed back on philosophy. We're pushing back on mostly it's philosophy of mind that's fucked. I mean, it's totally fucked, and it has been subsumed by neuroscience. We just don't all know it yet. And as soon as you get rid of this philosophy of the mind bullshit and you start dealing with other really more important aspects of philosophy, I think the field will leap forward, and be bearable. Because it's I wonder, do you think Danny's cooled off now? He seems to be cooling off. You think he's okay? You think I can bring him back in?
I hope so.
I don't know. I think he's cool now. I think he smoked a doobie. He's cool. Are you cool, Dan?
No, what I want to say is obviously
no, hold on. Before you continue, you have to answer one question. Do you smoke weed?
Are you cool?
No, I don't know. I'm a straight edge. Anyway, I don't like to drink either. The sensitive one is actually Speed here, not me, right? The fact that you had to get me out of my stream.
You're going meta. You're going meta. I dare you. Don't go meta. Don't go meta.
So you want to talk about the conversation now. So let's go back. What does it mean to say that behavior? You don't want meta or conversation. You don't want the meta or conversation. Wrap up the stream, and then whoever wants to talk to me, talk to me. But if you don't want to talk to me, just leave the stream.
Okay, let's. So, do you guys want to talk to Danny yet backstage? I think I'm going to.
Well, when the stream ends, I will probably hop out just because it's midnight and I want to eat food. I mean, that's genuinely nothing against Danny. I don't have a problem.
How about you, Grace? Do you want to hang around and talk to Danny?
I don't mind if Danny wants to have a conversation. I'll stick around. If you stick around, I'll continue talking. It depends on whatever you guys do.
Yeah, I'm gonna end. I'm gonna end the live stream. I think everybody's fucking bored with this anyway. We've got 8 people watching, but anyway, I'll end the live stream and put you guys back room, and you can have at it. Now I'm gonna go away. Okay. Okay. So we're ending live. Good night, everyone. Goodbye, cruel world.
And remember, science may not have all the answers, but religion has none of them.
That's